This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I'm still trying to process what happened to me last Christmas, and I don't think I'll ever look at the holidays the same way again. I need to get this off my chest because it's been haunting me for months now, and maybe someone out there has experienced something similar. I'm a single dad with two little girls, Emma, 8, and Sophie, 5. Their mom isn't really in the picture anymore, so I try extra hard to make holidays special for them. Last year, I was browsing through the post-Christmas clearance at Target on Boxing Day when I spotted this ornament that had a built-in camera. It was marked down to like $12 from $40, and I immediately thought it would be perfect for the following Christmas. The ornament looked like a regular glass ball, red with some glitter, but it had this tiny camera lens that you could barely notice unless you were looking for it. The box said it could record for about 3 hours on a single battery. I thought it would be amazing to record myself dressed as Santa, putting presents under the tree, then show the girls on Christmas morning. They were still young enough to believe, and I figured this would be magical for them. I kept the ornament hidden in my closet all year, and honestly forgot about it until early December, when I was pulling out all the Christmas decorations. I was so excited to finally use it that I immediately put in the battery and tested it out. It worked perfectly. The picture was clear, and it had a decent wide angle that could capture most of my living room. Fast forward to Christmas Eve. We had our usual traditions, baking cookies for Santa, reading the night before Christmas, and the girls leaving out milk and cookies before going to bed around 9 p.m. They were so excited they could barely sleep, but eventually they did. Around 11:30, I set up the camera ornament on the tree, positioning it so it had a clear view of the fireplace and the area where I'd be placing the presents. I hit record, checked that the little red light was on, and went to get changed into my Santa suit. I went all out with the costume, full suit, beard, pillows stuffed in my belly, the works. I came back downstairs around midnight and spent about 30 minutes arranging presents, eating the cookies, drinking the milk, and even leaving some sooty boot prints by the fireplace, using some ashes and an old pair of boots. I wanted the girls to have real evidence that Santa had been there. After I finished, I left the camera running, thinking it would be cool to catch them coming down in the morning too. Christmas morning came, and the girls woke me up at 6 a.m. sharp, jumping on my bed and screaming that Santa had come. We went downstairs, and their faces lit up when they saw all the presents. Before they could start tearing into them, I remembered the camera. I told them I had a special surprise and that Santa might have been caught on camera. They absolutely lost it with excitement. I grabbed my laptop, removed the memory card from the ornament, and loaded up the video. The three of us huddled on the couch, still in our pajamas, eager to see Santa in action. The video started playing, showing our empty living room with the tree lights twinkling. Then about 10 minutes in, there I was in my Santa suit, placing presents, eating cookies, the whole routine. The girls were squealing with delight. But then Emma suddenly pointed at the screen and said, "Daddy, what's that blue present, the shiny one by the fireplace?" I froze. I didn't recognize it. It was wrapped in metallic blue paper with a silver bow, nothing I had bought or wrapped. It was sitting right there by the fireplace, clearly visible in the video, but I hadn't noticed it in the actual room that morning. Before I could process this, Sophie chimed in, "That must be from Mr. L." My blood ran cold. I had no idea who Mr. L was supposed to be. "Sophie, honey, "Who is Mr. L?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The Christmas elf, silly. He visits sometimes when we're sleeping," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I felt sick to my stomach, but tried not to show it. I told the girls I needed to check something and asked them to wait. I went over to the tree and looked around. There was no blue present. I searched the entire living room, behind the furniture, everywhere. Nothing. I returned to the couch, my mind racing, and continued the video. As I watched myself leave the room in the video, something caught my eye. In the far corner of the living room, partially hidden by the shadow of our bookshelf, was a figure. I hadn't noticed it at first because it was so still, but now I could clearly see what looked like a person standing there. I quickly told the girls I needed to fix something on the computer and positioned the screen away from them. I rewound the video and looked more carefully. From the timestamp, this figure had been standing there the entire time I was in the room dressed as Santa. It hadn't moved an inch while I was bumbling around placing presents, completely oblivious. The figure was tall and thin, wearing what looked like an elf costume, pointy shoes, green tights, a red tunic, and a pointed hat. But there was nothing cheerful about it. The costume looked old and worn, and the face— I couldn't make out the face clearly, but it didn't look like a mask. It was pale and elongated. My hands were shaking as I continued watching. About 20 minutes after I left the room, the figure finally moved. It took slow, deliberate steps toward the center of the room. Now in better light, I could see more details. Long, bony fingers, unnaturally long legs, and a face that was wrong. It wasn't clearly human, with features that seemed stretched and misaligned. It walked to the tree, right up to the camera, and just stared into it. I could hear breathing, slow and raspy, getting louder as it got closer. Then the video stopped. I slammed the laptop shut, told the girls I needed to check something upstairs, and ran to my bedroom. My mind was racing. Someone had been in my house. Someone had been watching me while my children were sleeping upstairs. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, when I remembered the blue present from the video. I went back downstairs, trying to act normal for the girls. I asked them casually if they had seen a blue present anywhere. Emma mentioned she saw it earlier by the fireplace, but thought I must have moved it. Sophie insisted again it was from Mr. L and asked if we could find it. Against my better judgment, I decided to look for it again. This time, I searched more thoroughly, moving furniture and looking underneath things. Finally, behind the curtain near the window, I found it. A small box wrapped in metallic blue paper with a silver bow, exactly as it had appeared in the video. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was lightweight, maybe the size of a jewelry box. The girls crowded around me, excited to see what was inside. I carefully unwrapped it, fighting the urge to throw it out the window and run. Inside the box was a single item, the battery from the camera ornament. I immediately checked the ornament on the tree. The battery compartment was empty. Whoever, or whatever, had been in my house had not only watched me, but had approached the camera after I left, removed the battery, wrapped it as a gift, and placed it somewhere in my living room. All while my daughters and I were asleep upstairs. I managed to keep it together in front of the girls. I told them it was just a spare battery Santa must have left for the ornament. They quickly lost interest and went back to their presents. As soon as I could, I checked all the doors and windows. Everything was locked from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints in the snow outside, nothing missing or disturbed in the house except for that camera battery. I spent the rest of Christmas Day in a state of panic, jumping at every noise, checking and rechecking the locks. I couldn't call the police, What would I tell them? That some creature in an elf costume had been standing in my living room watching me dress up as Santa? That it had somehow entered my locked house, taken a battery from a camera, and left it as a gift? They'd think I was insane. After the girls went to bed that night, I stayed up watching their room. I checked the house repeatedly, looking in closets, under beds, behind curtains. I found nothing. In the days that followed, I installed security cameras throughout the house. I changed all the locks. I even had a security company come and do an evaluation. But nothing made me feel safe, because something had been in my house watching us, and I had no idea how it got in or out. It's been almost a year now, and nothing else has happened. But I still can't shake the image of that figure standing in the corner of my living room, perfectly still, watching me. I can't forget the sound of its breathing as it approached the camera, and I definitely can't forget Sophie's casual mention of Mr. L, the Christmas elf, who visits sometimes when we're sleeping. I've tried asking Sophie more about Mr. L, but she just shrugs and says he's nice and brings presents sometimes. Emma says Sophie is making it up. I wish I could believe that. Christmas is coming again, and I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to pack up the girls and spend the holidays literally anywhere else. But another part of me wonders if Mr. L would just follow us. I still have the video. I've watched it countless times trying to make sense of what I saw. Sometimes I think my mind was playing tricks on me, that maybe it was just a shadow or a reflection. But then I remember the battery, the blue present, the way Sophie talked about Mr. L like she knew him. I've thought about posting the video online, but I'm afraid of what people might say. I'm afraid they'll think I'm crazy, or worse, that they'll see exactly what I saw and confirm my worst fears. I don't know if anyone else has experienced anything like this. I don't know if I'm losing my mind or if something truly inexplicable happened in my home last Christmas. All I know is that I'm terrified of what might happen this year when the decorations go up and the lights start twinkling. Because somewhere out there, Mr. L might be waiting to pay us another visit. And the worst part? Last week, I found Sophie talking to someone in her room. When I asked who she was talking to, she just smiled and said, "Mr. L says he can't wait for Christmas. He says he has more presents for us this year." I checked her room thoroughly. There was no one there. No way anyone could have gotten in or out without me seeing them. But on her dresser was a small candy cane that I know wasn't there before. I don't know what to do. I don't know who or what Mr. L is. All I know is that something was in my house last Christmas, watching me, watching my children, and I'm terrified it's coming back. I never thought I'd be sharing this. It's been almost 5 years, but typing this out still makes my chest tight. I guess some wounds never fully heal. They just sort of scab over. It happened on Christmas morning when I was 17. Looking back, there were probably signs that something was off in the days leading up to it, but I never could have predicted what would happen. Christmas had always been a big deal in our house. Mom would go all out with decorations. Dad would blast those cheesy Christmas albums, and we'd have this whole routine. The night before, we'd all wear matching pajamas. Super embarrassing, but also kind of nice. Watch Christmas movies, and wake up early the next morning. As the oldest of 3 kids, I was usually the one making sure my younger siblings didn't peek at their presents early. That year felt normal at first. We had our usual Christmas Eve traditions. My grandparents were visiting from Ohio and staying in our guest room. My brother Tyler, 14, was hyped about rumors of an Xbox game he wanted, and my sister Kayla, 15, had been dropping not-so-subtle hints about wanting iTunes gift cards. I had asked for some books, specifically a nice hardcover set of Lord of the Rings that I'd been eyeing at Barnes & Noble, and maybe some new headphones since mine were falling apart. When we went to bed that night, I remember feeling that familiar Christmas excitement. I wasn't a little kid anymore, but there's something about Christmas morning that still felt magical. I woke up around 7:30 to the sound of Tyler literally running down the hallway. "It's Christmas!" he was shouting. I got up, put on my glasses, and headed downstairs. Everyone was already gathered in the living room. Mom and Dad on the couch sharing coffee, my grandparents in the armchairs, and Tyler and Kayla sitting cross-legged on the floor near the tree. The room looked like a Hallmark card, twinkling lights, garland, the whole 9 yards. "Morning, sleepyhead," Mom said when she saw me. I mumbled something back and found a spot on the floor. Dad started handing out gifts while Christmas music played softly in the background. The first warning sign should have been that I didn't see any packages with my name on them, but I figured they were just buried under the others. We always took turns opening gifts, one person at a time so everyone could see what others got. Grandma went first, unwrapping a scarf Mom had bought her. Then Grandpa got a book about what you from Dad. Then it was Mom's turn. Dad handed her a small box, and she opened it to find a silver pendant necklace she'd been wanting. She hugged him and put it on immediately. Dad went next, opening a speaker system for his car that he'd been talking about for months. Tyler was practically vibrating with excitement when Dad handed him a gift. He tore into it like a wild animal and actually screamed when he saw the Xbox games he wanted. Then Kayla opened her first gift, iTunes gift cards, just like she'd asked for. We continued this pattern for about half an hour. With each round, I became increasingly aware that no one was handing me anything. At first, I thought maybe they were saving mine for last. Maybe they got me something big or special. But as the pile under the tree dwindled, that hope began to fade. When the last gift was opened, a sweater for Mom from my grandparents, there was nothing left. Everyone was admiring their presents, thanking each other, and I just sat there empty-handed. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I didn't get anything, not a single present. For a moment, I thought it might be a prank. Maybe they were hiding my gifts somewhere else, setting up for a big reveal. I looked around at everyone's faces, waiting for someone to say, "Just kidding," or, "Wait, we forgot something." But instead, there was this horrible dawning awareness that spread across the room like a stain. Mom looked at Dad with wide eyes. Dad's smile froze. My grandparents exchanged glances. Tyler and Kayla suddenly became very interested in their new things. "Wait," Mom said finally, her voice unnaturally high. "Where are Jason's presents?" Dad's face went pale. "I thought you were shopping for him this year." "No, we talked about this. You said you'd take care of the boys and I'd handle Kayla and the grandparents. I got stuff for Tyler, but I thought..." They went back and forth like this, while I just sat there, feeling smaller by the second. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a mistake that could be quickly fixed. They had genuinely forgotten to buy me anything for Christmas. Not just one of them. All of them. My parents, my grandparents, even my siblings hadn't noticed I was the only one without gifts under the tree. Grandma jumped in, her voice shaky. "I thought you two were handling the kids' presents. We brought gift cards for all of you, but we gave them to Sarah to put in the stockings." She looked at my stocking hanging on the fireplace. I hadn't even checked it yet. It was flat and empty. "I didn't get any gift cards for Jason," Mom said quietly. The argument escalated. Dad was blaming Mom for not communicating clearly. Mom was saying Dad never listens. Grandpa started defending Grandma. Meanwhile, Tyler and Kayla were pretending to be absorbed in their new things, not making eye contact with me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My face burned with humiliation. I wasn't a materialistic person. It wasn't about the stuff. It was about sitting there while my entire family realized they had completely forgotten about me. Like I was invisible. Like I didn't matter enough to remember. "It's fine," I said, even though it was the furthest thing from fine. "Really, it's not a big deal." Mom started crying, which somehow made it worse. "Jason, I'm so sorry. We'll go shopping tomorrow, I promise. You can pick out whatever you want." I said it's fine. My voice sounded weird, distant. I stood up, stepping over wrapping paper. "I'm just going to go read for a bit." I went upstairs to my room and shut the door. I could still hear them arguing downstairs, their voices rising and falling. I grabbed my old paperback copy of The Fellowship of the Ring and tried to lose myself in Middle-earth, but the words kept blurring. I wasn't crying. I was too shocked for that. But I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides. About an hour later, Mom knocked on my door. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She sat on the edge of my bed and tried to explain. Apparently, there had been some miscommunication about who was shopping for whom. Dad thought she was handling my gifts. She thought he was. Neither of them had double-checked. The grandparents had brought gift cards but given them to Mom to distribute, and somehow mine never got purchased. "We'll go first thing tomorrow morning," she promised. "You can pick out anything you want." I nodded, but we both knew that wasn't the point. You can't fix "we all forgot you existed on Christmas morning" with a belated shopping trip. The rest of the day was excruciating. We always had this big Christmas dinner, but this year it was painfully awkward. No one knew what to say. Conversations would start and then falter. Tyler tried to get me to play one of his new games, but it felt like pity. Kayla offered to share her iTunes cards, which just made it worse. Dad kept drinking eggnog with rum, getting progressively more frustrated, occasionally snapping at Mom when she tried to smooth things over. I said, "I'm sorry, what more do you want?" I heard him yell in the kitchen. Grandpa made a half-hearted joke about how when he was a kid, they were lucky to get an orange in their stocking. No one laughed. I picked at my food and answered questions with one-word responses. All I wanted was for the day to be over, but it dragged on endlessly. The forced cheer was almost worse than if they'd just acknowledged how badly they'd screwed up. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the morning over and over. The look on everyone's faces when they realized. The rush to assign blame. The terrible, awkward aftermath. What hurt the most wasn't the lack of presence. It was the realization that I had somehow become invisible in my own family. Everyone was so wrapped up in their own lives that they'd collectively forgotten me. The next day wasn't any better. My grandparents left early, claiming they wanted to beat traffic, but I knew they just wanted to escape the tension. Mom and Dad went to work without saying goodbye, even though they'd both taken the week off in previous years. Tyler went to a friend's house to play his new games, and Kayla went to the mall with her friends. I stayed home alone, too depressed to call any of my friends. What would I even say? "Hey, want to hang out?" By the way, my entire family forgot I existed on Christmas. It was too pathetic. Mom came home that evening with a couple of hastily wrapped presents. The Lord of the Rings set I'd wanted and a pair of expensive headphones. She tried so hard to make it special, suggesting we do a mini Christmas right then, but it felt like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. I thanked her and put the gifts in my room, but I didn't open them for days. When I finally did, I couldn't enjoy them. Every time I looked at those books, all I could think about was sitting in that living room, slowly realizing that no one had thought of me. The weirdest part is how everyone tried to pretend it never happened afterward. No one brought it up again. When school started back up and people asked how my Christmas was, I just said fine and changed the subject. What else could I say? It's been almost 5 years and I still get this sick feeling in my stomach when December rolls around. I've moved out now, and last year I made an excuse to skip family Christmas altogether. I told them I couldn't get time off work, but really, I just couldn't face it. The memory of that day is still too raw. Sometimes I try to understand how it happened. Was I really that forgettable? That unimportant? I was always the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who didn't cause problems. Maybe that made me easier to overlook. Maybe they all assumed someone else was thinking of me because I never demanded attention like my siblings did. The thing is, there was no big dramatic reason for what happened. No family secret or hidden resentment. It wasn't a prank or a lesson or a misunderstanding that gets cleared up in the final act. My family just forgot. And that's almost harder to process than if there had been some explanation. I don't hate them for it. Most days, I've even convinced myself that I've moved past it. But then something will trigger the memory. A Christmas commercial, the sound of wrapping paper, seeing a family opening gifts in a movie. And it all comes rushing back. That hollow feeling, that realization that I was the only one who didn't matter enough to be remembered. I don't know why I'm sharing this now. Maybe writing it out will help me finally let it go. Maybe someone else has experienced something similar and won't feel so alone. Or maybe I just needed someone to know that this happened, that it was real, that on Christmas morning 5 years ago, I learned what it feels like to be completely forgotten by the people who are supposed to love you most. I never thought I'd be telling this story online, but after seeing others share similar experiences, I feel like I need to get this off my chest. What happened to me 14 years ago in San Jose Paso Nuevo still gives me nightmares. I've tried to forget it, but I can't. Even now, typing this out, my hands are shaking. I moved to this small town near Cofre de Perote in Mexico back in 2009 for work. It's a farming community where everyone knows everyone, and life is normally peaceful and simple. But about 6 months after I arrived, something strange started happening. Farm animals began disappearing. At first, it was just a chicken here, a rabbit there, the kind of thing you might blame on coyotes or wild dogs. But then larger animals started vanishing too. Goats, pigs, even a calf from old Rodriguez's farm. What made it weird wasn't just the number of animals going missing, but how they disappeared. No blood, no signs of struggle, no fence breaks. They were just gone. And it kept happening night after night. After about 3 weeks of this, the town was on edge. Humberto Martinez, who owned the largest goat farm in the area, had lost 35 animals already. In total, our small community had lost 52 animals in under a month. For farmers whose livelihoods depend on their livestock, this was devastating. Don Agustin, the oldest man in town, he was like 90 or something, called for a community meeting at the town square. I still remember how his weathered face looked in the dim light of the plaza, as nearly everyone in San Jose Paso Nuevo gathered around. "This is not a normal predator," he said, his voice surprisingly strong for his age. My grandfather told me stories of such things when I was a boy. When someone suggested setting up night watches, Don Agustin shook his head but didn't argue. You could tell he knew something he wasn't saying. We organized watches anyway. 3 men per farm, rotating through the night. I volunteered for Humberto's farm since he'd lost the most. But something really strange happened. Each night, no matter who was on watch, they would fall asleep. All of them. Even guys like Miguel, who worked night shifts at the factory in the next town over, and were used to staying awake all night. They'd wake up at dawn to find more animals missing. After a week of failed watches, Humberto's wife Rosa came to another town meeting looking terrified. She said she'd gotten up at around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom when she saw something on their fence. At first, she thought it was a large dog, but when she walked closer to the window, it turned to look at her. She said its eyes reflected the moonlight like mirrors, and then it leaped off the fence and vanished into the darkness. The way she described the jump, like it was floating, made my skin crawl. That's when Humberto announced he'd pay 5,000 pesos to whoever killed whatever was taking his animals. That was good money in our town, about a month's wages for most people. I needed that money. My mom back in Veracruz needed surgery, and I was trying to save up. So when Humberto asked for volunteers for another night watch, I raised my hand immediately. 4 others joined me: Carlos, Pedro, Manuel, and Esteban. We were all young, in our 20s or early 30s, and all of us brought hunting rifles or shotguns. "Tonight we catch this thing," Humberto said, handing each of us a thermos of strong coffee. "Drink this if you feel sleepy." We positioned ourselves around Humberto's goat pen, a large enclosure with about 40 animals inside. I was on the north side with Carlos, while the others spread out to cover all angles. We agreed to check in with each other every 30 minutes by flashlight signal. The night was clear and cool, with a half moon providing just enough light to see the outlines of the goat pen and the surrounding area. For the first few hours, nothing happened. We talked quietly, drank coffee, and stayed alert. Around 2 a.m., I noticed Carlos hadn't responded to my last signal. I nudged him and found him completely passed out. His coffee thermos had spilled on the ground beside him. I tried to wake him, but he wouldn't budge. I signaled to Pedro across the pen, but got no response. Then Manuel. Then Esteban. Nothing. I was the only one still awake. My heart started racing. I remembered Rosa's story and the way Don Agustin had shaken his head, like he knew the night watches were useless. I thought about waking Humberto, but his house was about 200 meters away, and I didn't want to leave my post. That's when I heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from the direction of the forest that bordered Humberto's property. At first, I thought it might be branches moving in the wind, but there was no wind that night. The sound got closer, more deliberate. Something was approaching. I raised my rifle and peered into the darkness, trying to control my breathing. The scratching stopped, replaced by what I can only describe as heavy breathing. Not like a person, more like an animal, but bigger than any animal I knew from these parts. Then I saw it, emerging from the tree line about 30 meters away. In the moonlight, I could make out a large gray shape moving on all fours. At first, I thought it was a very large dog or maybe a wolf, though wolves aren't common in this region. But as it got closer, I realized it was nothing like any animal I'd ever seen. It was about 1.5 meters tall, even while crouching on all fours. Its skin wasn't fur, but looked like leathery, wrinkled gray skin with patches of what might have been coarse hair. The proportions were all wrong. Its front limbs were too long, almost like human arms, but ending in what looked like massive paws or hands with long claws. I froze, unable to move as it approached the pen. When it reached the fence, about 20 meters from where I was hiding, it stood up on its hind legs. Standing upright, it was easily over 2 meters tall. Its face, God, its face. It had a long snout like a dog, but the rest of its features were disturbingly human-like. Its eyes caught the moonlight, completely white with no visible pupils. It had only one ear. The other side of its head looked damaged or deformed. And its skin. I could see veins pulsing beneath the gray surface. Its hands had fingers ending in claws that must have been 10-15 centimeters long. They gleamed in the moonlight like polished bone. I tried to raise my rifle, but my arms felt like lead. A strange buzzing filled my head, and I felt an overwhelming urge to close my eyes. It took everything I had to fight it off. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood, and the pain helped me stay conscious. The creature, I knew now it had to be what the old-timers called a nagual, a shapeshifter from local legends, leaped over the 2-meter fence like it was nothing. The goats didn't scatter in panic as you'd expect. Instead, they seemed frozen, like they were hypnotized. The nagual grabbed 2 goats, one under each arm, and they didn't even bleat. They hung limp as dolls. That's when I finally managed to raise my rifle and aim. I pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. The gun just clicked. I tried again. Click, click, click. The creature's head snapped in my direction. Those white eyes seemed to stare right through me. It made a sound, not a growl or a snarl, but almost like a laugh. A horrible gurgling laugh that sounded like it came from a human throat filled with mud. Then it leaped back over the fence, still carrying both goats, and sprinted toward the forest with incredible speed. I don't know what came over me, fear, rage, or just plain stupidity. But I started running after it. "Wake up!" I screamed at my sleeping companions as I ran past them. None of them stirred. I followed the creature into the forest, keeping my distance but trying not to lose sight of it. The moonlight barely penetrated the tree canopy, but I could see its pale form moving ahead of me, still carrying the goats. After about 15 minutes of running, we reached the base of a hill that led up toward Cofre de Perote. The creature disappeared into what looked like a small cave opening partially hidden by bushes. I stopped about 50 meters away, breathing hard, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no way I was going into that cave alone. I marked the location as best I could in my mind, noting a distinctive lightning-struck tree near the entrance, and then ran back to get help. When I returned to Humberto's farm, the others were finally starting to wake up, confused and disoriented. None of them remembered falling asleep. When I told them what I'd seen, Carlos and Pedro looked skeptical, but Manuel and Esteban seemed scared. They'd heard the old stories about the nagual. "My grandfather said they're men who make deals with the devil to become animals," Manuel whispered. "They feed on livestock to maintain their power." We woke Humberto and told him everything. By then it was almost dawn. He immediately called Don Agustin, who arrived leaning heavily on his cane, but with fire in his eyes. "You saw La Bruja," the old man said. "The witch, some call it nagual. It has walked these lands since before the Spanish came." Don Agustin insisted we needed Father Mateo from the church. Once the priest arrived, we gathered more men from town, about 15 in total, all armed, and I led them back to the cave I'd found. It was around 10 a.m. when we reached it. In the daylight, the cave entrance looked smaller, just a dark hole about a meter high in the hillside. The ground around it was disturbed, with what looked like drag marks leading inside. There was also a strange, rotten smell coming from the opening. Father Mateo stepped forward with his Bible and holy water. He began to pray in Latin, sprinkling the water around the cave entrance. At first, nothing happened. Then we heard it, a long, painful howl from deep inside the cave. It started as an animal sound, but transformed into something that sounded horribly human. a scream of rage and pain. Several men crossed themselves. One dropped his gun and ran. The rest of us stepped back as Father Matteo continued his prayers, his voice growing louder to compete with the howling from the cave. The screaming went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse than the screaming. "We must seal it inside," Don Augustine said. "It cannot be killed by bullets." We spent the next few hours gathering large rocks and piling them in front of the cave entrance. Some men brought cement from town to fill the gaps. By late afternoon, the entrance was completely sealed. As we worked, I noticed something strange. Scattered around the area were bones. Not just animal bones, but what looked disturbingly like human remains. No one wanted to examine them too closely. We returned to town exhausted but relieved, believing we'd trapped the creature. That night, for the first time in weeks, no animals disappeared from any farm in San Jose Paso Nuevo. 3 days later, a woman from a neighboring town came looking for her missing husband. He was a trader who bought and sold animals in different villages. No one had seen him for nearly a month, which, we realized, coincided with when the animal disappearances began. The woman showed us his picture. None of us recognized him, but Don Augustine stared at the photo for a long time, his wrinkled hand trembling slightly. "Some men," he finally said, "are not what they appear to be." The woman left without finding any trace of her husband. We never told her about the cave or what we'd sealed inside it. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but strange things kept happening in San Jose Paso Nuevo. People reported hearing weird noises at night, scratching on their roofs or windows. Black birds would gather on rooftops, just sitting and watching. Sometimes there was a horrible smell that would drift through town for a few hours and then disappear. Most disturbing were the reports of a tall, thin man dressed in black, seen walking toward the hills in the direction of the cave. Always at dusk, always alone, and always vanishing before anyone could approach him. I stuck it out for about 2 more months before I couldn't take it anymore. The nightmares were getting worse, dreams of white eyes watching me from the darkness, of hands with long claws reaching for me. I moved away, back to Veracruz, and I've never returned to San Jose Paso Nuevo. I still keep in touch with Manuel, though. He tells me the sealed cave has become something of a local legend now. Teenagers dare each other to go up there at night, but no one ever gets close. They all report feeling suddenly exhausted and turning back. The animals don't disappear anymore, but sometimes livestock is found dead near the forest edge. Not eaten, but just drained somehow. I don't know what we trapped in that cave 14 years ago. I don't want to know. But sometimes, when I'm lying awake at night and the wind makes strange sounds outside my window, I remember those white eyes and that horrible laugh. And I wonder if it's still in there, waiting, or if something wearing the shape of a man is walking the roads of Mexico, looking for another small town where no one would recognize a stranger's face. I've waited 3 months to write this. 3 months trying to convince myself what I saw wasn't real. But after what happened last week, I can't keep quiet anymore. I need to tell someone. I live alone on my family's old farm in rural Tennessee. It's about 80 acres, most of it wooded, with maybe 20 acres that used to be pasture. I keep to myself, work from home doing IT stuff, and enjoy the peace and quiet. November 12th started like any other hunting day during deer season. I woke up at 4:30 a.m., had my coffee, and got my gear ready. I've hunted these woods my entire life, same as my dad and his dad before him. That morning was cold, around 38 degrees, with a light frost on the ground. I remember being excited because conditions were perfect. Cold enough to get the deer moving, but not so cold I'd freeze my ass off in the tree stand. I parked my truck about a quarter mile from my favorite stand, grabbed my Remington 30-06, and started walking in with my headlamp on. About halfway to my stand, something felt wrong. You know that feeling when you're absolutely certain someone's watching you? That prickly feeling on the back of your neck? It was like that, but way more intense. I stopped and listened. That's when I noticed the silence. If you've spent any time in the woods, you know they're never actually quiet. There's always something. Birds, squirrels, insects, something. But that morning, there was nothing. Just the sound of the wind moving through the bare trees. I told myself it was just the cold keeping the critters quiet, but deep down, I knew better. I kept going, moving slower now, stopping every few yards to look and listen. The weird thing was, I knew no one else should be out there. My property is clearly posted with no trespassing signs. The nearest neighbor is Kenny, my buddy who owns the farm that borders mine to the west, and he was hunting his own land that day. About 200 yards from my stand, I came to a small clearing. The sun was just starting to come up, and there was enough light to see without my headlamp. That's when I found it. An 8-point buck lay dead in the middle of the clearing. Not just dead, destroyed. Its throat was completely torn out, and its stomach had been ripped open. The intestines were pulled out and stretched across the frost-covered ground, steaming in the cold air. This wasn't a kill from a coyote, wasn't from another hunter either. There was no bullet wound I could see, and no hunter would waste a trophy buck like that. Whatever killed this deer was big and strong. The deer's neck was nearly severed, and there were claw marks, actual fucking claw marks, across its flanks. I've been hunting for 25 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Mountain lions haven't been in these parts for a century, and a black bear wouldn't kill like this. As I stood there trying to process what I was seeing, a sound cut through the silence that made my blood run cold. It was a scream, deep, guttural, and so loud it seemed to shake the trees. It wasn't human. It wasn't an animal I recognized either. It was something in between, like someone had taken a man's scream and a bear's roar and twisted them together. I nearly dropped my rifle as I spun around. Nothing was there, just trees and morning fog drifting between the trunks. I chambered around, my hands shaking so bad I nearly fumbled it. "Hello," I called out, immediately regretting it. Whatever made that sound wasn't going to answer me, and I'd just given away my position. I decided to forget about hunting and get back to my truck. Something was seriously wrong, and every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of there. I started walking back, faster than I should have, making too much noise. I kept stopping to look behind me, but the woods were still empty. Then I heard it. Footfalls, heavy ones coming from somewhere behind me, matching my pace, but deliberately staying just out of sight. I'd stop, they'd stop. I'd walk, they'd walk. Whatever it was big. I could feel the ground vibrate slightly with each step. About halfway back to the truck, I caught a glimpse of something moving between the trees about 50 yards behind me. Just a dark silhouette, but it was huge, at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. It was keeping pace with me, but staying just far enough away that I couldn't get a good look. I broke into a run then, no longer caring about noise. I just wanted to get to my truck. When I finally reached the clearing where I'd parked, I nearly cried with relief. I fumbled with my keys, threw my rifle in the passenger seat, and jumped in. That's when I realized I had a problem. In the dark that morning, I'd parked in a spot that had seemed solid, but was actually soft from recent rain. My truck had settled into the mud, the tires sunk about 3 inches deep. I turned the key, put it in drive, and felt the tires spin without catching. Shit, I was stuck. Keeping one eye on the tree line, I shifted into four-wheel drive and tried again. The truck rocked but didn't move. I was about to try once more when something at the edge of the clearing caught my eye. There it was, standing right next to my passenger door, not 10 feet away from me, was, I don't even know what to call it, a creature, a monster, something that shouldn't exist. It was at least 8 feet tall, covered in thick, matted black hair or fur. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in hands with long fingers tipped with what looked like claws. But its face, Jesus, its face. It looked like some failed experiment to combine human and animal features. The eyes were set deep in the skull, reflecting the morning light with an amber glow. Its nose was flat and wide, almost like a gorilla's but wrong somehow, and its mouth, way too wide for its face, filled with teeth that looked too jagged and sharp to belong to anything natural. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. Then it opened that terrible mouth and let out the same scream I'd heard before. At close range, it was deafening. I could see its breath in the cold air, could smell a stench like rotting meat and wet fur. I stomped on the gas pedal, and this time the four-wheel drive caught. The truck lurched forward, throwing mud from the tires. I didn't look back, just drove as fast as I could down the rutted dirt road that led to the main gravel road. About a quarter mile from the main road, I found my path blocked by a fallen hackberry tree. A big one, probably 80 years old, lying completely across the road. I swear to God, that tree hadn't been there 30 minutes earlier when I drove in. There's no way I would have missed it. The thing is, there hadn't been any wind strong enough to take down a tree that size. And when I got out to look, stupidly looking back, I could see it hadn't fallen naturally. It had been uprooted, pulled up from the ground, by something strong, really fucking strong. I got back in my truck and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. I called Kenny. "I need help," I said when he answered. "Something's blocking the road out of my back 40. Can you bring your chainsaw?" Kenny must have heard the fear in my voice because he didn't ask questions, just said he'd be there in 10 minutes. While I waited, I kept the truck running and my rifle on my lap. I scanned the trees constantly, expecting to see that thing emerge at any moment. Kenny showed up in his beat-up F-250, chainsaw in the bed. When he got out and saw the tree, he whistled. "Damn, Jacob, that's a big one. Storm take it down?" "There wasn't any storm," I said. "It wasn't here when I drove in this morning." Kenny looked at me funny, then walked over to examine the root ball. That's when we both saw them. Footprints, huge bare footprints in the soft earth around the uprooted tree. They were clearly bipedal but bigger than any human foot, at least 18 inches long, and they showed toe marks with what looked like claws at the tips. "What the fuck is this?" Kenny whispered, crouching down to look closer. Before I could answer, we heard it again. That scream, coming from somewhere in the woods, but closer now. Kenny's head snapped up, his face going pale. "You've heard that before?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Last week, when I found 3 of my cows dead, throats torn out, just like that. It took us 20 minutes to cut through the tree enough to move it. The whole time we kept looking over our shoulders, feeling like we were being watched. As we were loading the chainsaw back into Kenny's truck, we heard the scream again, even closer. And then we saw it, standing at the edge of the woods, partially hidden behind a large oak, but visible enough to make out its massive shape and those reflecting eyes. "Drive," I told Kenny. "Now." We both scrambled into our vehicles and tore out of there as fast as we could on the muddy road. When we reached the main road, we pulled over. both of us shaking. "What the fuck was that?" Kenny asked. "I don't know," I said, "but it killed a deer in my woods this morning, tore its throat out." Kenny was quiet for a minute. "My cows," he finally said. "When I found them last week, I thought maybe it was coyotes or a wild dog pack. But the wounds, they were too big, and there were tracks like those back there." I told Kenny everything I'd seen that morning. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. "My grandpa used to talk about something in these woods," he finally said. "Called it the walker in the dark. Said it was tall as a tree and hungry for blood. I always thought they were just stories to keep us kids out of the woods at night." I wish I could say that was the end of it, that whatever that thing was, it moved on or went back to wherever it came from. But 3 days later, I found my German Shepherd, Max, hanging from a branch 10 feet off the ground at the edge of my property. His throat had been torn out, just like the deer. It looked deliberate, like a message, like revenge. I called the sheriff, but what could I say? That a monster killed my dog? I told him I thought it might be someone trespassing, maybe trying to scare me. He looked around, took some notes, and basically told me it was probably just kids being sick bastards. But Kenny and I know better. We've both found more tracks since then, more dead animals, always with the throat torn out, always left where we'll find them. And at night, sometimes, we hear that scream echoing through the trees. I've started sleeping with my rifle next to my bed, put up security cameras all around my house. Kenny's done the same. We've told a few other locals what we saw, but most just think we're crazy or we're seeing things. One old-timer just nodded, though, and said his father used to tell stories about something similar back in the 1950s. Last week, I was taking the trash out after dark when I heard something moving in the tree line about 50 yards from my house. My security light caught 2 amber eyes reflecting back at me about 8 feet off the ground. They just watched me for a minute before disappearing back into the darkness. It's still out there, watching, waiting, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know if it's some kind of unknown animal or something else. All I know is it's real, it's dangerous, and it seems to have developed some kind of grudge against me and Kenny. I haven't been hunting since that day, haven't even been in my woods, but sometimes when I look out my kitchen window toward the trees, I swear I can see something moving just inside the tree line, something big, something watching, and I know it's just a matter of time before it decides to come closer. I still can't believe what happened to me and the whole town back in San Jose Paso Nuevo. It's been years, but I can't shake it. I've never told this to anyone outside the village because, well, who would believe it? But I need to get this off my chest. I was living in San Jose Paso Nuevo, this tiny place near Cofre de Perote in Mexico. It's not much, just a small town where everyone knows each other, everyone's poor, and we all depend on our livestock to survive. That's why what happened hit us so hard. It started gradually. A chicken would disappear here, a goat there. At first, we thought it was just coyotes or maybe some desperate person stealing food. But then more animals started vanishing in broad daylight. No tracks, no blood, nothing, just gone. By the 3rd month, people were getting desperate. These weren't just pets. These animals were our livelihood. Each animal lost meant less food on the table, less money for medicine, for school supplies. You get the picture. Humberto was hit the worst. He had the biggest farm in our area. Nothing fancy, just more animals than most of us. In 1 month, he lost 35 animals. 35, can you imagine? That's someone's entire yearly income gone just like that. We decided to organize night guards. Simple plan. Groups of 3 men would take shifts watching different properties. I volunteered for the rotation at Humberto's place since he was losing the most. The first night was uneventful, the second night too. On the third night, something weird happened. All 3 guys on duty fell asleep, all at the same time. They swore they weren't tired, that they had even brought coffee to stay alert. But all 3 passed out for about 2 hours. When they woke up, 6 more animals were gone. This pattern continued for weeks. Every single night, guard would mysteriously fall asleep, no matter how much caffeine they consumed or how determined they were to stay awake. And every morning, more animals would be missing. The count reached 52 across the whole town. People were starting to talk about evil spirits or curses. Then Humberto's wife, Maria, came running to the town center one afternoon. She was pale and shaking. She said she'd seen something on their fence. Not a normal animal. She described it as dog-like, but wrong somehow. When she approached it, it jumped away with a leap no dog could make. She said it didn't move like any animal she'd ever seen. That night, Humberto gathered about 15 of us men in his kitchen. He put a bottle of his homemade mezcal on the table and his old revolver beside it. He said, whoever killed whatever was taking his animals could have both. For a poor farmer to offer up good mezcal and a weapon, that showed how desperate he was. I don't know what came over me, but I volunteered to be on guard duty again that night. Maybe it was the mezcal talking, but I was fed up with whatever was terrorizing our town. 5 others joined me. Juan, Eduardo, Miguel, Tomas, and Humberto himself. We set up around the goat pen with flashlights and whatever weapons we could find, mostly machetes and a couple of old hunting rifles. Humberto had his revolver. We spread out in pairs about 20 meters apart with clear sight lines between us. Around 1:30 a.m., I noticed Miguel and Tomas nodding off. I went to shake them awake, but felt this strange heaviness come over me too. My eyelids felt like they had weights on them. I pinched myself hard, slapped my face, even bit my hand until it bled, anything to stay awake. That's when I heard it, a soft shuffling sound, like something dragging itself along the ground. But it was coming from above us, not along the ground. I looked up and saw nothing but starlight. The sound grew closer. Juan whispered that he heard it too. Eduardo was fighting to keep his eyes open. Humberto had his revolver raised, scanning the darkness. Then the smell hit us, like rotten meat and something else, something chemical almost. The air felt different, heavier, like just before a massive thunderstorm when the pressure drops. I raised my flashlight toward the sound and caught a glimpse of something moving along the top of the fence. The beam only caught it for a second, but what I saw, God, I still see it in my nightmares. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, but hunched over. Grayish skin that looked both slick and rough at the same time. It had these white eyes, not like a normal animal's eyes with pupils and irises, just solid white that reflected the flashlight beam. One of its ears was missing, leaving just a hole in its head. You could see the veins under its skin, black and pulsing. And its hands? Its hands had these claws, must have been 10-15 centimeters long. They didn't look like animal claws. They were more like human fingers that had grown and hardened into these curved, yellowed spikes. In that moment, I knew what the old-timers in our village called a nagual, a shapeshifter, something not quite human, not quite animal. It moved so fast. In the time it took me to process what I was seeing, it had already leaped from the fence into the goat pen. The animals went crazy, bleating and trying to run, but there was nowhere to go. Humberto fired his revolver. The sound was deafening in the quiet night, but the bullet seemed to do nothing. Juan and I raised our rifles and pulled the triggers, but nothing happened. They jammed somehow, both at the same time. Eduardo charged with his machete, but the thing swatted him aside like he was nothing. Eduardo flew about 3 meters and crashed into the fence. The creature grabbed 2 goats, one under each arm. They were still alive and screaming. Then it leaped, not a normal jump, but something impossible, clearing the 2-meter fence from a standstill and landing silently on the other side. We chased after it. I don't know why. We should have run the other way, but something drove us to follow. The creature moved in this bizarre, loping gait, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on all 4s. It was heading toward the mountains. About 1 kilometer into the wilderness, we lost sight of it. We were about to turn back when Juan noticed a cave entrance partially hidden by brush. None of us had known there was a cave there, despite having lived in the area our whole lives. The smell was stronger around the entrance, and there were strange markings on the rocks, not graffiti, but deep gouges like something had been sharpening its claws. We weren't stupid enough to go inside at night. We backed away and marked the location. By then, the sky was starting to lighten with dawn approaching. We went back to the village and told everyone what we'd seen. Most believed us. They'd lost too many animals to doubt something strange was happening. Some of the older folks crossed themselves and muttered about nahuales and old legends. Humberto was already organizing a larger group to go back to the cave. But first, we went to Father Alejandro at the church. Even the non-religious among us felt we needed some kind of protection. Father Alejandro didn't dismiss us like I half expected. He looked grim and took out his oldest Bible and a silver cross that had been in the church for generations. By mid-morning, about 20 of us men, plus Father Alejandro, headed back to the cave. The priest blessed water from the church and sprinkled it around the entrance while reciting prayers in Latin. As he did this, the strangest thing happened. We heard noises from deep inside the cave. Not animal noises, not human either. Like screaming, but wrong somehow. Pained howls that echoed and seemed to come from multiple throats at once. Father Alejandro's face went white, but he continued the blessing. The sounds got worse, more frantic, angrier. Then suddenly they stopped. We decided to seal the entrance. We gathered rocks, logs, anything we could find, and blocked it completely. Then we set up a watch rotation. 3 men at a time would guard the sealed entrance for the next 48 hours. Nothing tried to come out during those 2 days. On the 3rd day, as we were starting to believe it was over, a woman from a neighboring town came looking for her husband. She said he traveled between villages buying and selling animals and hadn't come home. He told her he was heading to San Jose Paso Nuevo. No stranger had come to buy animals in our town. We asked what he looked like when he'd left. As she described him, I felt the blood drain from my face. He matched the build of the creature we'd seen, and she said he'd been gone exactly as long as our animals had been disappearing. That's when we realized we hadn't trapped some ancient evil or wild creature in that cave. We'd trapped a man, a nagual, someone who could change his shape to prey on us. The woman left confused and angry that we couldn't help her. We never told her what we suspected. What could we say? Sorry, we think your husband is a shape-shifting monster who's been eating our livestock, and we've sealed him in a cave. We thought it was over, but weird things kept happening. People heard strange noises at night, not animal sounds, not human sounds. Black birds started appearing on rooftops just watching. Sometimes the horrible smell would return for a few hours, then disappear. A few people claimed to see a man in black walking toward the mountain where the cave was. But when they followed, no one was there. I couldn't take it anymore. About a month later, I moved away from San Jose Paso Nuevo. I told everyone it was for work, but really, I couldn't sleep there anymore. I couldn't look at the mountains and know what was trapped inside them. I still don't know what to make of what happened. Was it really a nagual? Was it just a deranged man? Why did our guns jam? Why did everyone fall asleep on guard duty? How did he make that impossible jump? I know how this sounds, but I swear on my mother's grave, everything I've told you is true. There are dozens of people in San Jose Paso Nuevo who saw what I saw that night. The animals stopped disappearing after we sealed the cave. Sometimes I think about that woman still looking for her husband. Sometimes I wonder if whatever was in that cave is still there, or if it found another way out. And sometimes, when I can't sleep at night, I wonder if it knows who I am, and if it's looking for me too. I still don't like talking about what happened that night. It's been almost 7 years, but I can still smell the pine and feel the cold air in my lungs when I think about it. I've told this story exactly 3 times, to my dad, my mom, and one drunk night to my college roommate who probably thought I was full of shit. I guess writing it out might help me process it, even after all this time. I grew up in a tiny town about 40 miles north of Anchorage. Not even a town, really, more like a collection of houses and a general store. Most people there either worked in Anchorage or made their living off the land somehow. My dad was a mix of both, worked construction during the week and spent every weekend in the wilderness. From the time I could walk, Dad had me out there with him. Camping, fishing, tracking, shooting. I learned it all. By 16, I could field dress a moose and navigate back to our truck from anywhere in a 50-mile radius. I wasn't some wilderness prodigy or anything, just a normal kid who grew up learning this stuff like it was riding a bike. 2 weeks before my dad's 48th birthday, he slipped a disc in his back lifting some drywall at work. The doctor said he needed complete rest. No hunting, no fishing, basically no moving from the couch for at least a month. Dad was going stir-crazy after just 3 days. Mom pulled me aside one evening when Dad was dozing on pain meds. "Your father's birthday is coming up," she said, folding laundry in their bedroom. "I know what would mean more to him than anything, if you could bring home some meat. Nothing big, even a couple grouse would do. Just something you hunted yourself." I nodded like it was no big deal, but honestly, I'd never gone hunting alone before. I was always with Dad or my Uncle Pete, but I had my license, knew how to handle weapons safely, and had enough experience that it shouldn't have been a problem. Plus, I was 18, officially a man, right? That Friday after school, I loaded up Dad's old Ford F-150. I packed his Remington 700, some extra clothes, my tent, sleeping bag, and enough food for 2 days. The plan was simple: drive out to our usual spot, hike in about 4 miles to a clearing we knew well, set up camp, and hunt at dawn the next morning. Dad was half asleep on the couch when I left, but he gave me a weak thumbs up and muttered, "Don't forget to check the wind direction before setting up, I know." I finished for him. The drive took about 2 hours. I parked at the small gravel lot where the Forest Service road ended. There were no other vehicles there, which wasn't unusual for a Friday in October. Most hunters came on weekends, and tourist season was long over. I remember checking my watch, 3:42 p.m., as I shouldered my pack and rifle. Plenty of time to hike in and set up camp before dark. The temperature was dropping already, maybe high 30s, and the forecast called for clear skies. Perfect conditions. The hike in was uneventful. I followed the small game trail we always took. stopping occasionally to check landmarks. The forest was quiet in that late autumn way. No birds, just the crunch of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig under my boots. The air had that crisp smell of pine and coming snow. By 6:15, I reached the clearing and set up my tent. I collected firewood, started a small fire, heated up some canned stew, and settled in. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped into the 20s. The stars came out bright and clear, like someone had punched holes in black velvet. I texted Mom to let her know I'd made camp safely. We had spotty cell service even out there. Then tucked my phone away to save battery. I decided to turn in early, around 9:30, to be fresh for dawn hunting. I cleaned up camp, stored my food in a bear-proof container hanging from a tree about 50 yards away, and crawled into my sleeping bag. I placed the rifle next to me inside the tent, safety on but loaded. Standard procedure in bear country. I must have fallen asleep pretty quickly. The next thing I remember was waking up disoriented. My watch said 2:37 a.m. Something had woken me. A noise, I thought, but the forest was dead silent now. That's what felt wrong. Alaska woods are never completely silent, even at night. There's always something. Wind in the trees, small animals moving, distant owls. But there was nothing, no sound at all, except my own breathing. I lay still, listening hard. The inside of my tent was pitch black. I hadn't brought a lantern, just my headlamp, which was somewhere by my feet. I didn't want to move to get it. Then I heard it, a soft crunching of leaves maybe 15 or 20 feet from my tent, something walking slowly, deliberately. My first thought was bear, but bears aren't usually so careful about how they move, and they're rarely active at night in October, already getting sluggish for winter. The footsteps stopped. Then, clear as day, I heard a voice. "Hello?" It was a child's voice. A young boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. My blood went cold instantly. There was no reason, zero, for a child to be out here, 4 miles from the nearest road, at 2:30 in the morning in near freezing temperatures. "Hello?" It came again. The voice was exactly the same. Identical pitch, identical inflection, like a recording being played twice. I reached for my rifle, wrapping my fingers around the stock, feeling for the trigger guard in the dark. "Hello?" A third time, exactly the same. The footsteps started again, circling my tent. Slow, deliberate steps that didn't sound right. Too evenly spaced, too careful. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. The footsteps stopped immediately. For maybe 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard breathing. Heavy, wet breathing, like someone with pneumonia. It was right outside the tent wall, not 3 feet from my head. "Hello?" The voice came again, but this time it was different, deeper, like someone had slowed down a recording, and it was right where the breathing was coming from. I raised my rifle, pointing it at the tent wall where the sound was coming from. My hands were shaking so bad I wasn't sure I could hit anything. "I've got a gun," I said, trying to sound confident. "Identify yourself right now." The breathing got louder, wetter. I could smell something now, like rotten meat and something else, something chemical, almost like ammonia. Then, in the weak moonlight filtering through the tent fabric, I saw a shadow rise up outside. It was tall, much taller than any person should be. The breathing was higher up now, maybe 7 feet off the ground. "Hello?" The voice was completely different now, deep, guttural, like rocks grinding together, not even pretending to be human anymore. I was so terrified I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think. I just kept the rifle aimed at the shadow, my finger hovering over the trigger, and then I saw them, 5 long, curved shapes pressing against the tent wall, fingers or claws. Each one had to be 6 inches long, pressing harder and harder until the fabric began to tear. I screamed, I'm not ashamed to admit it, and scrambled backward in my sleeping bag as far as I could go, which wasn't far in the small tent. The fabric split open with a ripping sound, and moonlight spilled in, illuminating what stood there. I've tried for years to make sense of what I saw, to rationalize it, to tell myself it was a bear standing upright, or a man in some kind of costume, or a stress-induced hallucination. But I know what I saw. It had skin like charcoal, not black, but gray and ashen, with a texture like burned paper. Its face was mostly featureless except for its eyes, huge, stark white, with no pupils I could see, and what passed for a mouth, a slack, drooling opening that hung open unnaturally wide, oozing something thick and clear like slime. Its head was completely bald, covered in what looked like pockmarks and deep scratches, some of which seemed to be seeping the same clear fluid. It was rail-thin but tall, at least 7 feet, with arms too long for its body. And those hands, 5 long black claws on each, sharp as knives and curved like fish hooks. I don't remember pulling the trigger, but the rifle exploded in my hands. The creature staggered backward, making a sound I never want to hear again, like a scream played in reverse, getting higher and more distorted. I fired again, and again. The third shot hit it in the chest, and it collapsed backward into the trees. I sat there frozen, rifle still raised, for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The forest was completely silent again. No movement, no sound, nothing. Eventually, I managed to find my headlamp with trembling hands. I switched it on, pointing it at the torn opening in my tent. There was nothing there. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, which wasn't much at that point, I unzipped the tent door and stepped out, rifle at the ready. I swept the beam of my headlamp in a wide arc around the campsite. Nothing moved, but on the ground, about 10 feet from my tent, was a small dark puddle. I approached it cautiously, keeping my rifle up. It was blood, or something like blood. It was darker than human blood, almost black, and thicker, with a consistency like maple syrup. But that was it. No body, no trail of blood leading away. Just that one small puddle, maybe the size of my palm. I don't remember much of what I did next. I know I didn't sleep. I packed up my gear as fast as I could, leaving behind anything non-essential. I remember checking my watch compulsively. 3:15 a.m., 3:22 a.m., 3:36 a.m., as I stuffed things into my pack. By 4 a.m., I was jogging down the trail back toward the truck, my headlamp bouncing wildly, illuminating trees and shrubs that all seemed to hide watching figures. I kept the rifle in my hands the whole time, safety off. Every few minutes I'd stop, turn around in a complete circle, listening and looking. But I never saw or heard anything following me. I made it back to the truck in just over an hour, a hike that normally took 2. Dawn was just starting to lighten the eastern sky as I threw my gear in the back and peeled out of there, spraying gravel. I drove straight home, walking through the door around 7:30 a.m. Mom was in the kitchen making coffee. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. "Are you hurt?" I couldn't tell her the truth. I just shook my head and muttered something about getting spooked by noises in the night and deciding to come home early. She didn't believe me. Moms never do, but she didn't push it. Dad was awake when I went into the living room. He looked at me, at the rifle I was still carrying, at my filthy clothes and wild eyes. "Sit down," he said, patting the couch beside him. I sat and told him everything, every detail, exactly as it happened. I expected him to tell me I'd dreamed it, or that it was a bear, or that I was just spooked by being alone in the woods for the first time. But he didn't. He listened silently, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I've never seen anything like that. But your grandfather used to talk about things in those woods that weren't natural. Old stories from the native people around here. I always thought they were just stories." He put his hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry I wasn't with you. Things might have been different if I had been. But I don't think they would have been. And in a strange way, I've come to see my dad's back injury as a blessing. Because whatever was out there in the Alaskan wilderness that night, whatever evil thing was using a child's voice to lure me out, I don't think it was something my dad could have protected me from. I think it would have taken us both. I haven't been hunting since that night. I moved to Seattle for college and stayed there afterward. I tell people it's for the job opportunities, but the truth is, I never want to be alone in the woods again, especially not in Alaska. I still have nightmares sometimes. I wake up hearing that voice saying, "Hello," in that identical mechanical way. And sometimes, on very bad nights, I dream that I see those white, pupilless eyes watching me from outside my bedroom window, 7 stories up. I don't know what I encountered that night. I don't want to know. But I do know that there are things in this world that we don't understand, things that science can't explain. And some of them are hunting in the dark. I still get goosebumps thinking about what happened that night back in 2019. I was 14 then, living in this small town in eastern Tennessee where nothing ever happens. My friends Hannah and Chris and I were bored out of our minds that Friday night in October. Hannah's older brother Jake had just gotten his license and let her borrow his beat-up Ford Explorer while he was at work. Looking back, we definitely shouldn't have been driving around. None of us had licenses, but that's what happens when you're a teenager with nothing to do in a rural town. We decided to take a drive through the back roads near the Appalachian foothills. It was around 10:30 p.m., pitch black except for the headlights. We had the windows cracked, and I remember the smell of fallen leaves and that distinct autumn chill in the air. Hannah was in the passenger seat giving directions. Chris was sprawled out in the back, and I was driving, going maybe 35 mph at most because these roads were winding and full of potholes. We had been driving for maybe 40 minutes just talking about school drama and listening to music. The roads got narrower as we went deeper into the countryside. Route 29 is this old 2-lane road that cuts through some really dense woods with hardly any houses around. The trees formed this tunnel overhead, and our headlights were the only source of light for miles. No street lights, no houses, nothing but forest on both sides. I remember checking the gas gauge and telling Hannah we should probably turn around soon when she suddenly yelled, "Slow down! There's something in the road!" I hit the brakes, not slamming them, but enough to slow us down pretty quick. About 30 feet ahead of us was this small animal sitting right in the middle of our lane. At first, I thought it was just a raccoon or possum. We see those all the time around here. But as we got closer, rolling forward at like 5 mph, I realized it wasn't moving at all. Most animals bolt when they see headlights, but this thing just sat there, perfectly still, staring directly at us. "What is that?" Hannah whispered, leaning forward in her seat. "Is it hurt?" I slowed to a crawl, maybe 2 mph, and that's when I got my first good look at it. The thing was about the size of a large house cat, but it wasn't a normal cat. Not even close. Its fur was this weird flesh color, like pale skin with patches of thin, wispy hair. It didn't have the pointy ears you'd expect on a cat. They were smaller, rounder, almost like a kitten's, but not quite right. Its body was too long, too thin. But the eyes, God, the eyes are what I still see when I close my own at night. They were these bright, burning red-orange orbs with flecks of yellow that reflected our headlights in a way that made them look like they were generating their own light. Hannah described them perfectly later when she said they looked like the pits of hell were burning inside them. That's exactly what it was like. Not animal eyes at all. They didn't have that green glow that cat eyes get in the dark. These were something else entirely. The worst part was how it watched us, completely motionless, head slightly tilted, those eyes fixed directly on me behind the wheel. I felt like it was looking straight through the windshield and into me. Not at me, into me. "Just go around it," Chris said from the back seat. His voice had this nervous edge I'd never heard before. I eased the car to the left, giving the thing a wide berth. As we passed, all three of us craned our necks to keep looking at it. It rotated its head, just its head, not its body, to follow our movement, those eyes never blinking, never leaving us. The headlights weren't on it anymore as we passed, but somehow its eyes still glowed in the darkness. We were dead silent as I accelerated back to normal speed. I think we were all processing what we'd just seen. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and I felt this cold sweat breaking out all over my body. I couldn't have been driving more than 5 seconds after passing it when Chris suddenly yelled, "What the fuck was that?" Hannah whipped around in her seat to look out the back window. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. The road behind us was completely empty. "It's gone," Hannah said, her voice barely audible. "It's just gone." "Stop the car," Chris insisted. "I want to see where it went." "No fucking way," I replied, pressing harder on the accelerator. No way in hell was I stopping to look for that thing. "Did you guys see its eyes?" Hannah asked, her face pale in the dim light of the dashboard. That wasn't normal." "Maybe it was a bobcat," I suggested, not believing it myself. "Or a fox with some kind of disease." Chris shook his head. "I've seen bobcats. My uncle hunts them. That wasn't a bobcat. And it definitely wasn't a fox." We spent the entire drive back to Hannah's house talking in circles about what we'd seen. We came up with dozens of explanations. Maybe it was a sick mountain lion, or some exotic pet that escaped, or a raccoon with rabies. But none of them fit. None of them explained those eyes or how it disappeared so quickly without making a sound. When we got back to Hannah's house, we were still so freaked out that we ended up telling her mom about it. I expected her to laugh it off or tell us we were exaggerating. Instead, her face went completely white. She sat down at the kitchen table and asked us to describe it again in detail. After we finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she told us something that made my blood run cold. "When I was about your age, maybe 16, my cousin Becky and I were hiking out past Miller's Creek. It was daytime, middle of summer. We stopped to rest near this thick patch of bushes, and I saw something watching us. At first I thought it was a weird-looking cat, but the fur was all wrong. And the eyes..." She trailed off for a second. "They were exactly like you described, like fire burning inside them." Hannah's mom told us she and her cousin had run all the way back to the car that day, and they never went hiking in that area again. She said she still thought about it sometimes, even 30 years later. She'd never told anyone except her husband because she was afraid people would think she was crazy. "Whatever you do," she told us before we left, "don't go looking for it. Some things out in those woods aren't meant to be found." I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept seeing those eyes every time I closed mine. The memory of it sitting so still in the middle of the road, Watching us made me feel sick to my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been waiting for us specifically. In the days that followed, I went down an internet rabbit hole trying to figure out what we saw. I read about wendigos, skinwalkers, and all sorts of cryptids from Appalachian folklore. Nothing seemed to match exactly, but the stories about shapeshifters gave me nightmares. I even asked my grandfather, who's lived in these mountains his whole 82 years. He just got real quiet when I described it and then changed the subject. When I pressed him, he muttered something about things that shouldn't be named and told me not to talk about it anymore. That scared me almost as much as the creature itself. It's been over 4 years now, and I still get a knot in my stomach when I drive on rural roads at night. Chris, Hannah, and I don't talk about it much anymore, but I know they haven't forgotten. Sometimes Hannah will text me late at night when she can't sleep, just to ask if I still think about those eyes. I always do. People online have tried to explain it away, saying it was probably just a bobcat that got scared by our headlights or maybe a fox with mange, but they weren't there. They didn't see how unnaturally still it was, how it moved only its head to watch us, how those eyes burned in the darkness, and they certainly can't explain how it vanished so completely in the seconds after we passed it. What bothers me most now isn't just what we saw. It's knowing that the same creature has been out there for at least 30 years since Hannah's mom saw it. And who knows how long before that? Is it still out there now, sitting in the middle of some dark road, waiting for someone else to drive by? Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I can see those red-orange eyes gleaming in the corner of my room. I never turn on the light to check. I don't want to know if I'm right. Last month, I was driving back from a friend's house around midnight. It was raining, and I took a wrong turn, ending up on an unfamiliar back road. As I rounded a curve, my headlights swept across the wet pavement, and for a split second, I thought I saw something small sitting in the middle of the road ahead. My heart nearly stopped. I slammed on the brakes so hard I skidded. When the car came to a stop and I looked again, there was nothing there. But I swear, just before it disappeared, if it was ever really there at all, I caught a glimpse of those same hellish eyes. I reversed and turned around immediately, taking the long way home on the main highway. I don't drive the back roads at night anymore. I don't think I ever will again. Whatever that thing was, demon, skinwalker, or something that doesn't have a name, it's still out there in the darkness of the Appalachian foothills. And sometimes, in my darkest thoughts, I can't shake the feeling that it remembers us too. I've never told this story online before. To be honest, I never wanted to think about it again. But I keep having these nightmares where I'm back there. Maybe writing it down will help. This happened when I was 12 years old. My family and I lived in California, but that summer we drove to Idaho to visit my mom's sister and her family. We stayed at their house for a couple days, and then headed to this small city in the Rocky Mountains where my aunt and uncle owned this cabin. I was pretty excited because I'd never been to the mountains before, and this place was seriously remote. The cabin was pretty nice, not some run-down shack or anything. It had electricity, running water, 3 bedrooms, and a big living room with these huge windows that faced the backyard. The backyard itself sloped down to this freezing cold river, maybe 30 feet wide, and on the other side was this massive mountain completely covered in pine trees. It looked awesome during the day, but at night, I don't know, something about it just felt wrong. The first night we were there, I couldn't sleep. The room I was sharing with my little sister Brianna was super hot. My aunt and uncle didn't have air conditioning in the cabin since Idaho nights are usually cool. But this particular night was unusually warm. I waited until my sister was asleep and then opened the window to get some air. I was just lying there staring at the ceiling when I heard it for the first time. This sound coming from across the river, deep in those trees. It's hard to describe, like a high-pitched raspy screech that went on for maybe 5 seconds. It didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. It definitely wasn't a mountain lion or a bear. Hell, it didn't even sound human. It was like, imagine if someone was being burned alive, but they weren't even human to begin with. That's the closest I can get to describing it. I shut the window immediately and spent the rest of the night wide awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself it was just some weird bird or something. I didn't say anything to anyone the next morning. I figured they'd just think I was being a baby. The second day was normal. We went fishing, had a cookout, played cards. My cousins were cool. Alex was 16 and thought he was hot shit because his dad had taught him to shoot and let him carry this little pistol when they went hiking for bears, they said. Julia was my age and we got along great. Then there was Karina, who was 10, same age as my sister Brianna. The 4 of us younger kids hung out while the adults did their thing. That evening after dinner, Julia suggested we go explore the forest across the river. There was this old hiking trail that went all the way up to the top of the mountain, about 9,000 feet according to my uncle. Alex overheard us talking and said he'd take us if our parents said it was okay. Looking back, I'm still shocked they agreed. Maybe because Alex had that gun, or because my uncle said the trail was well marked and they'd hiked it tons of times. Either way, around 4 p.m., the 5 of us headed out. Me, Julia, Brianna, Karina, and Alex leading the way with his pistol on his hip. We each had backpacks with water, some snacks, and flashlights, since my uncle figured we might be coming back after dark. The bridge across the river was about a 1/4 mile downstream from the cabin. It was just this narrow wooden thing, but it got us across. The hike up was actually pretty fun. The trail zigzagged up the mountain through these incredibly dense pine trees. It was steep in places, but not dangerous. It took us about 3 hours to reach the summit. By then it was starting to get dark, but the view was incredible. You could see for miles, other mountains, valleys, even the tiny lights of the town in the distance. We ate some snacks, took some pictures with Alex's camera, and then started heading back down. That's when things got weird. It was getting dark fast, that way it does in the mountains where the sun just seems to drop behind the peaks, and suddenly it's night. We turned on our flashlights about halfway down. Alex was in front, then Julia, me, and the 2 younger girls behind me. I kept getting this feeling that we were being watched. At first I tried to ignore it, but then I started noticing how quiet it had gotten. No birds, no insects, nothing. "Do you guys feel like something's watching us?" I finally asked. Julia looked at me like I was crazy, but Alex stopped and looked around, his hand moving to his pistol. "Let's pick up the pace," he said, trying to sound casual, but I could tell he felt it too. We moved faster, stumbling a bit on the rocky parts of the trail. That's when we heard it, the same horrible screech I'd heard the night before, only louder, much louder, like whatever made it was closer. We all froze. Even Alex looked scared now. "What the hell was that?" Julia whispered. "Language," Alex said automatically, but his heart wasn't in it. Probably just a mountain lion or something. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. And I think he did too. "Let's go," he said, and now we were practically jogging down the trail, our flashlights bouncing wildly. creating these crazy shadows in the trees. The screech came again, and this time it was definitely closer. It seemed to be coming from somewhere up the mountain behind us, like it was following us down. "Alex," Karina whimpered, "I'm scared." "It's fine," he said, but then he drew his pistol. "Just keep moving." We continued down the trail, moving as fast as we could without actually running. The two younger girls were starting to cry. Julia grabbed my hand, which would have been awesome under any other circumstances. Then we heard it a third time, and it was so close I actually felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I swear it couldn't have been more than 100 yards behind us, somewhere in the darkness between the trees. Alex stopped and turned. "Everyone get behind me," he said. Then he raised the pistol and fired a shot into the air. The sound was deafening in the quiet forest. For a moment, everything was silent. Then we heard something moving away through the trees, branches snapping, leaves rustling. Whatever it was big, and the gunshot had startled it. "See?" Alex said, trying to sound confident. "Scared it off." But I wasn't so sure. As we continued down the trail, I kept hearing noises behind us, like something keeping pace just out of sight in the darkness beyond our flashlights. We were maybe a half-mile from the river when we heard it again, that awful screech, but this time it was different. It sounded angry. "Run!" Alex yelled, and we did. We were full-on sprinting down that trail now, flashlights bouncing crazily, branches whipping at our faces. I could hear the two younger girls sobbing as they ran. Julia was right beside me, her breath coming in short gasps. Alex was ahead, constantly looking back over his shoulder. That's when I heard it, the sound of gravel crunching on the trail behind us, like footsteps, heavy footsteps. "Alex!" I shouted. "It's right behind us!" He spun around, raising his flashlight, and for a split second, I saw something I'll never forget. A dark, human-like outline at the edge of the light, but not human, not really. It was too tall, too wrong. Alex fired another shot, and the figure darted away into the trees. We ran again, faster than before if that was possible. We could see the river now, the moonlight reflecting off the water. The bridge was to our right, about a quarter-mile away, but that would mean running parallel to the river, and the trees where that thing was. "Straight across!" Alex yelled. "We'll swim." None of us argued. We burst out of the tree line and scrambled down the rocky bank to the river's edge. The water was ice-cold and fast-moving, but it wasn't super deep, maybe chest height on me, which meant the younger girls would have to swim. "Alex, they can't," I started. "I've got Karina," he said. "You help Brianna." We waded in, the cold water stealing my breath away. Julia was already halfway across. I grabbed Brianna's hand and we pushed forward, the current tugging at our legs. Behind us, I heard that terrible screech again, much closer this time. I couldn't help it. I looked back. It was standing at the edge of the trees, partially illuminated by our dropped flashlights. It was massive, 7 feet tall at least, covered in dark hair or fur. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in huge clawed hands that looked like they could tear through a car door. But its face, God, its face. In the dim light, all I could see were 2 glowing red eyes and the outline of what might have been a snout or a deformed mouth. "Alex!" I screamed. He turned, saw it too, and shoved Karina toward the far bank. "Go! Go!" Then he raised his pistol and fired 3 rapid shots at the creature. I couldn't tell if he hit it, but it darted back into the trees with another ear-splitting screech. We all scrambled up the far bank, soaking wet and freezing. The cabin was visible now, its windows glowing with warm light. We ran for it, not looking back, not stopping until we burst through the door, startling our parents who were playing cards at the dining table. They didn't believe us at first. How could they? But Alex was serious enough, and we were all so genuinely terrified that they had to acknowledge something had happened. My uncle got his rifle and went outside to look around, but he didn't cross the river. He said he didn't see anything unusual. We tried to describe what we'd seen, but even then it was hard to put into words. My aunt suggested it might have been a bear, but Alex insisted it had been standing on two legs the entire time, and no bear has glowing red eyes or makes sounds like that. My uncle said he'd lived in Idaho his whole life and never heard of anything like what we described. We left the next day. My aunt and uncle stayed. They said they'd never had any problems before and figured we'd just scared ourselves. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was all in our heads, some kind of shared hysteria or something. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that if I ever find myself back at that cabin, I'm never crossing that river again. Whatever lives in those woods can stay there. It's been 14 years now, and I've never been back to Idaho. Sometimes I think about calling my cousins to ask if they've ever talked about it, if they remember it the way I do. But I'm afraid of the answer I might get. Afraid they might tell me they've been back to those woods, back up that trail. Afraid they might tell me they've seen it again. I've been living on my family's property just outside Gallup, New Mexico my whole life. It's not much, just a single-story house with some land, a few dogs, and a hen house my grandfather built before I was born. We've always kept to ourselves out here, and until last month, I never thought twice about being alone outside after dark. It was a Thursday night in October. The weather had just started to cool down, and I was relaxing in the living room with my Uncle Benny and my two cousins, Mark and Tyler. My grandmother was in her bedroom, probably saying her nightly prayers. We were just watching some basketball game, nothing special. Around 10:30 p.m., the dogs started going crazy outside. Not their normal barking at a passing car or coyote in the distance. This was different, more urgent, more scared. "Damn, what's got them so worked up?" Mark asked, muting the TV. I got up and looked out the window. Our three dogs, a German Shepherd mix named Buddy, and two mutts we'd had for years, were all facing the back of the property, barking their heads off toward the tree line and the hen house. "Probably coyotes again," Uncle Benny said, getting up from his recliner with a grunt. "Better check on the chickens." Uncle Benny grabbed his flashlight from the kitchen drawer. I followed him, and Mark and Tyler came too. We all slipped on our boots by the back door and stepped outside into the cold night air. The dogs rushed up to us, still barking and whining, moving back and forth between us and whatever they'd spotted. "What is it, boys?" I asked, patting Buddy's head. He just kept barking toward the trees. Uncle Benny shined his flashlight toward the hen house about 50 yards from the back of our property. The beam cut through the darkness but didn't reveal anything unusual. The hen house looked intact from where we stood. "Let's go check it out," Uncle Benny said. "Bring some rocks, just in case." We each grabbed a couple of good-sized rocks from the pile we keep near the back porch for exactly this purpose. Coyotes are a constant problem out here, and sometimes throwing rocks is enough to scare them off without having to get the rifle. As we approached the hen house, the dogs stayed close to us, still agitated. Buddy's hackles were raised, and he kept growling at the tree line beyond the hen house. "Do you see anything?" I asked, scanning the area. "Not yet." Uncle Benny swept his flashlight across the trees. Then I saw it. a movement between two juniper trees about 20 yards behind the hen house. Just a quick flash of something. I couldn't make out what it was, just that something had definitely moved there. There, I pointed, between those two trees. Uncle Benny aimed his light where I pointed, but whatever it was had already moved. I don't see anything, Tyler said, squinting into the darkness. I swear I saw something moving, I insisted. We stood watching for another minute or two, but nothing moved again. The chickens inside the hen house were quiet, which was a good sign. They usually make noise when predators are nearby. Let's just check the hen house, Uncle Benny suggested. We approached cautiously. I shined my phone's flashlight through the chicken wire. All the birds seemed to be roosting normally. The gate was securely latched and everything looked fine. Must have scared it off, Mark said. Whatever it was. Uncle Benny nodded. Let's throw some rocks toward the trees anyway, just to be sure. We each threw our rocks toward the area where I'd seen the movement. They landed with dull thuds in the dirt and brush. Nothing responded or ran off. All right, let's head back, Uncle Benny said after a minute. Dogs still seem worked up, though. As we walked back to the house, the dogs kept looking back, whining. They clearly weren't satisfied that the threat was gone. When we got to the back door, my grandmother was standing there, wrapped in her robe. "What's all the commotion?" she asked in her soft voice. "Dogs were barking," Uncle Benny explained. "Thought it might be coyotes going after the chickens, but we didn't see anything." She nodded but looked concerned. "Come inside now, all of you." There was something about her tone that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We all filed back inside, and the dogs reluctantly followed, still glancing back toward the trees. We settled back in front of the TV, but the dogs wouldn't relax. They paced by the back door, occasionally letting out low growls. I tried to focus on the game, but my mind kept going back to that movement I'd seen. It hadn't looked like a coyote. It had been taller, more vertical. About 20 minutes later, we heard it, a loud rustling sound from outside, coming from the direction of the trees. Not just a little movement, this was violent. It sounded like something large was thrashing through the branches. We could hear limbs whipping and branches snapping. All four of us froze and looked at each other. The dogs went ballistic, barking and scratching at the door. "What the hell is that?" Tyler whispered. Uncle Benny was already on his feet. "Let's go." This time he grabbed his rifle from the gun cabinet. Mark and I grabbed our own flashlights, and we hurried back outside, leaving Tyler to stay with our grandmother. The sound had stopped by the time we got out the door, but the dogs were going crazy, pulling toward the trees. Uncle Benny held his rifle ready as we moved across the yard. "Hello?" he called out. "Anyone out there?" No response. We reached the hen house again and checked it. Still secure, chickens still quiet inside. But the dogs wouldn't go near the tree line. Buddy, who isn't afraid of anything, was backing away, growling. "I don't like this," Mark muttered. Uncle Benny swept his flashlight across the trees. "Probably just a deer or something." But it hadn't sounded like a deer. A deer moving through brush makes a distinctive sound. This had been different, more deliberate, almost angry. We searched around for a few minutes but found nothing. No broken branches on the ground, no footprints, nothing. It was like whatever had made that noise had vanished. "Let's get back inside," Uncle Benny finally said. "We'll check everything in the morning." I didn't sleep well that night. The dogs were restless, and I kept thinking about that movement I'd seen. It had been too tall for a coyote, too thin for a bear. I told myself it was probably just a person, maybe someone hiking through who got lost. But deep down, I knew that wasn't right either. When the sun came up the next morning, I was already awake. Uncle Benny was up too, making coffee in the kitchen. We nodded to each other, but didn't speak. Both of us were waiting for full daylight to check outside. After a quick breakfast, Uncle Benny, Mark, Tyler, and I headed out to the hen house. The dogs came with us, but they seemed nervous, not enthusiastic like they usually are for morning walks. What we found made my stomach drop. The gate to the hen house was wide open, so was the door to the coop itself, and every single chicken was gone, all 15 of them. No feathers, no blood, no signs of a struggle. They had simply vanished. "What the hell?" Mark said, staring at the empty hen house. Uncle Benny frowned, looking around the area. "This doesn't make sense. That gate was latched last night. I checked it myself." We spread out, looking for any sign of the chickens or whatever had taken them. That's when I noticed the tracks. They were in the soft dirt around the hen house. Strange, elongated footprints that didn't look human or animal. They went back and forth between the hen house and the trees as if something had been pacing. The prints were about the size of a man's foot, but wrong somehow. The toes were too long, the arch too pronounced. "Uncle Benny, look at this," I called out, pointing at the tracks. He came over and crouched down, studying them with a deep frown. "What the hell made these?" "They look like—" Mark started, then stopped. "Like what?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nothing, just weird tracks." Inside the hen house itself, we found only chicken tracks. No sign of whatever had made those footprints outside. No blood, no struggle. It was as if the chickens had simply walked out. As we stood there trying to make sense of it all, my grandmother appeared at the back door of the house. She was watching us, and even from that distance I could see the concern on her face. We walked back to the house, and she met us on the porch. "The chickens are all gone," Uncle Benny told her, "and there are strange tracks all around the hen house." She nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting this news. "It was a skinwalker," she said quietly. The word hung in the air between us. We're Navajo, and we've all grown up with stories of the Yi-Naldlushi, skinwalkers, witches who can transform into animals or something in between. But they were just stories to me, cautionary tales told around campfires. "Grandma, come on," Mark said with a nervous laugh. "It was probably just—" "Do not dismiss what you don't understand," she cut him off sharply. "I've lived here much longer than you. I know what visits in the night." She turned and went back into the house. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, we followed her. Inside, she was already gathering herbs from her small wooden box in the kitchen. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Protection," she said simply. "It came for the chickens last night. We must make sure it doesn't come back for more." She crushed some herbs between her fingers and began to pray quietly in Navajo. I recognized some of the words, a blessing for protection, a warding against evil. She worked methodically, her wrinkled hands moving with purpose. When she finished, she stood up straight and looked at each of us. "Now we must tell it to leave," she said. "All of us together." She led us back outside to the back porch. The dogs stayed inside this time, watching nervously through the screen door. My grandmother faced the tree line and the empty hen house beyond. She spoke clearly in Navajo, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. When she finished, she looked at us expectantly. "Now you," she instructed, "say it in Navajo. Go away. Go bother someone else." We repeated the phrase together, our voices joining hers. Go away. Go bother someone else. The words seemed to hang in the air. For a moment, I could have sworn I felt something listening from the trees, a presence, aware and calculating. My grandmother nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now we wait." We reinforced the hen house that day, adding new locks to the gate and door. Uncle Benny set up a trail camera facing the tree line. But the strangest thing was how quickly those weird footprints disappeared. By noon, they had somehow faded from the dirt, even though there had been no wind or rain to erase them. That night, we all stayed up late, taking turns watching out the window. Nothing happened. The dogs remained calm, the night quiet. The next morning, Uncle Benny checked the trail camera. Nothing had triggered it. We've bought new chickens since then, and they seem fine in the hen house. But I still can't shake what happened. Those tracks weren't made by any animal I know. And the way the chickens vanished without a trace, no blood, no feathers, nothing, doesn't make sense. Why would something that could open latches and gates so carefully then make such a racket in the trees? Was it trying to scare us? Playing with us? I find myself watching the tree line at dusk now, looking for movement. Sometimes I think I see something. A shadow that's too tall, too thin, but when I look directly at it, there's nothing there. My grandmother has put protection symbols around our property. She says the skinwalker won't come back, that we've sent it away. I want to believe her. But last night, I heard the dogs start to growl at something outside, and when I looked out my bedroom window, I swear I saw two eyes reflecting in the moonlight from the edge of the trees. I didn't wake anyone. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell your family that you think the thing that took our chickens is still out there, watching us? The trail camera hasn't captured anything unusual. No more strange tracks have appeared. But sometimes when I'm alone outside, I get this feeling like something is watching me, waiting. I keep telling myself it was just a person messing with us, or maybe a mountain lion that somehow opened the gates. But deep down, I know better. Whatever visited us that night wasn't natural, and I can't shake the feeling that it didn't leave just because we told it to. I've been sitting on this for too long. I need to get it off my chest, even if no one believes me. I've read other accounts here, and some of you might understand what we experienced that night 8 years ago when I was 16. It was supposed to be a fun camping weekend with my 3 best friends, Leah, Kathy, and Jennifer. We were all sophomores, excited for summer break, and Leah's dad had this old camper parked on some property they owned about 45 minutes outside town. Nothing fancy, just a basic trailer with a little kitchen, bathroom, and enough beds for the 4 of us. Leah's dad drove us out there on a Friday afternoon in June. It was hot as hell that day, and we were all sweaty by the time we arrived. The camper sat in this small clearing surrounded by pine trees. There wasn't much around, no neighbors, no facilities, just woods and a dirt path leading back to the main road. "You girls have your phones charged?" Leah's dad asked as he helped us unload our stuff. "Reception's spotty out here, but if you need anything, you can usually get a signal at the top of that little hill." He pointed to a rise about 100 yards from the camper. We nodded, barely listening. We were just excited to be away from parents for the weekend. After showing us where everything was, the generator, the water pump, the propane stove, he finally left, his truck kicking up dust as he drove away. For the first hour or so, everything was normal. We unloaded our snacks, fought over who would sleep where, and cranked up our portable speaker. Kathy had made these amazing cupcakes with rainbow frosting that we were saving for after dinner. Jennifer was telling us about some guy she'd been texting, and Leah was rolling her eyes at everything, being her usual sarcastic self. Around 6 p.m., while we were setting up the folding chairs outside, I heard it for the first time. This weird, I don't know how to describe it, like a humming sound, but not mechanical. It was almost like someone was humming a monotone note, but it kept changing pitch slightly, going up and down in this pattern that made no sense. It was coming from the trees behind the camper. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked. Kathy looked up from her phone. Hear what? That noise, like someone humming. Jennifer frowned. I didn't hear anything. But Leah, and this is what first struck me as weird, Leah didn't even ask what I was talking about. She just stared at me for a second with this blank expression, then went back to setting up her chair. Probably just a bird or something, she said, not looking up. But I knew it wasn't a bird. I'd never heard any bird make a sound like that. The humming stopped after a minute, and I tried to forget about it. We grilled some hot dogs on the little portable grill we'd brought and ate them sitting in our folding chairs as the sun started to go down. Everything felt normal again, and I convinced myself I was just being jumpy because we were in an unfamiliar place. Around sunset, Jennifer got up to use the bathroom inside the camper. A few minutes later, I realized she'd been gone a while, so I went to check on her. As I approached the camper door, it swung open, and Jennifer stepped out. She froze when she saw me, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me, over my shoulder, and her face, God, her face was just pure terror. Her mouth hung open, her eyes were wide, and she was trembling. I spun around, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing, just the trees and the darkening sky. Jen, what's wrong? I asked, turning back to her. And that's when things got really strange. In the split second it took me to turn back to her, her expression completely changed. The fear vanished, replaced by this eerily calm look. Nothing, she said, her voice flat. I just thought I saw something. She walked past me and rejoined the others like nothing had happened. I stood there for a moment, confused. And then I saw it, just at the edge of my vision. A sort of reddish-black orb hovering about eye level near the tree line. It was partially hidden behind a tree, almost like it was peeking out. When I turned to look directly at it, it was gone. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Nothing. I hurried back to the others, feeling genuinely freaked out now. Did anyone else see that? I asked. See what? Kathy asked, looking concerned. I don't know, like a ball of light or something by the trees. Leah laughed. You're seeing things. It's getting dark. Your eyes are playing tricks. Jennifer didn't say anything. She just stared down at her hands. As night fell completely, we moved inside the camper. Leah started a game of cards, and Kathy brought out her cupcakes. We ate them around the small table, the sugar helping to calm my nerves. Jennifer seemed back to normal, laughing and joking with us, and I started to think maybe I really had imagined everything. Around 11 p.m. we decided to go to bed. The camper had 2 small bedrooms, one with a queen bed that Leah and I took, and one with 2 twin beds for Kathy and Jennifer. We brushed our teeth, washed our faces using the tiny sink, and said goodnight. I fell asleep pretty quickly, exhausted from the day and the weird stress of what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen, but I didn't stay asleep. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. The digital clock on the small shelf next to the bed read 3:14 a.m. At first I wasn't sure what had woken me, but then I heard it. Noises coming from the kitchen area. Slight movements, like someone opening drawers or cabinets very slowly, trying not to make noise. My first thought was that one of the girls had gotten up for a midnight snack, but something felt wrong. The movements were too deliberate, too careful. I nudged Leah awake. "There's someone in the kitchen," I whispered. She sat up immediately, fully alert, which struck me as odd. Most people are groggy when woken suddenly, but Leah seemed instantly awake. "Let's check," she whispered back. We got up and crept toward the bedroom door. Just as we reached it, Kathy appeared in the hallway, looking scared. "Jennifer's not in bed," she whispered. I woke up and she was gone. The three of us moved silently toward the kitchen area. The camper was dark except for a bit of moonlight coming through the small windows. As we rounded the corner, I felt my blood turn to ice. Jennifer was sitting at the kitchen table, perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking, fixed on the wall. Her hands were flat on the table, palms down, and she was making that humming noise, the exact same sound I'd heard in the woods earlier. But that wasn't the worst part. Standing behind her, partially hidden in the shadows of the kitchen, was something. A figure darker than the darkness around it. It was tall, reaching almost to the ceiling of the camper, and impossibly thin. I couldn't make out any features. It was like a silhouette with no source of light to cast it. Just a black person-shaped void. It was bent slightly, its head, or what I assumed was its head, near Jennifer's ear, as if it was whispering to her. Jennifer just sat there, humming that terrible monotone sound, her eyes fixed and unblinking. None of us moved, none of us breathed. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but I was frozen in absolute terror. Then, slowly, the figure began to turn toward us. It didn't move like a person. It was too fluid, too smooth. As it turned, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread wash over me, like my soul was trying to escape my body. I've never felt fear like that before or since. Just as it fully faced us, still featureless, still just a void in the shape of a person, Leah gasped. The sound seemed to break whatever spell we were under. The figure moved suddenly, inhumanly fast, across the kitchen and through the small window above the sink. I don't mean it broke the window or opened it. It went through it like the glass wasn't even there. The moment it disappeared, Jennifer's head dropped to the table with a thud. The humming stopped. "Jennifer!" Kathy screamed, rushing to her. We surrounded her, shaking her, calling her name. She was breathing but completely unresponsive. Her eyes were closed now, and nothing we did would wake her up. We were terrified. The nearest hospital was over an hour away, and we had no car. Leah tried to call her dad, but like he'd warned us, there was no reception in the camper. "The hill," I said, remembering what Leah's dad had told us. "We might get reception on that hill he mentioned." "I'm not going out there," Kathy said, tears streaming down her face. "Not with that thing out there." "We have to," Leah said firmly. "Jennifer needs help." We argued for a few minutes, all of us scared out of our minds. Finally, we decided Leah and I would go to the hill together, while Kathy stayed with Jennifer. We grabbed the only flashlight we had and stepped outside. The night air was cool and still. No humming, no movement, just silent darkness. We moved quickly, staying close together, jumping at every sound. I kept expecting to see that figure materialize from the darkness, but nothing happened. We reached the hill, and thank God Leah got enough signal to call her dad. She told him Jennifer had passed out and wouldn't wake up, leaving out everything about what we'd seen. He said he'd come right away and to keep trying to wake her. By the time we got back to the camper, Jennifer was awake. She was sitting up, looking confused, with Kathy beside her. "What happened?" Jennifer asked as we burst in. "Why are you all looking at me like that?" We told her what we'd seen, her sitting at the table, humming, the figure behind her. She had no memory of getting out of bed or going to the kitchen. The last thing she remembered was falling asleep. We were all still freaking out when Leah's dad arrived. He took one look at our terrified faces and insisted on taking us all home right then, even though it was nearly 5 a.m. Jennifer kept insisting she felt fine, just confused. But none of us wanted to stay in that camper a minute longer. On the drive back, none of us mentioned what we'd seen to Leah's dad. What would we even say? We just told him Jennifer had sleepwalked, and we got scared when we couldn't wake her right away. The weird thing is, We all stayed friends after that. You'd think something so terrifying would have driven us apart, but it actually brought us closer. We never went camping again, but we stayed tight through high school and even ended up at the same college. Now, at 24, we all share an apartment in the city. We don't talk about that night much, but sometimes, when we're alone, one of us will bring it up. We still don't have explanations for what happened. The strangest part came about a year after the incident. We were having a sleepover at Kathy's house, and the subject of the camper somehow came up. Jennifer got really quiet, then admitted something she'd never told us before. "I remember seeing something that day," she said. "When I went to the bathroom before dinner, I looked out the small window and saw this shape. It wasn't a person, but it wasn't an animal either. It was watching us from the trees. I was so scared when I came out and saw it behind you." She looked at me. "But then, it's weird. I suddenly felt calm, like unnaturally calm, like someone had flipped a switch in my brain." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "I literally couldn't. It was like I wanted to, but my mouth wouldn't form the words." But here's the thing. Jennifer still has no memory of the nighttime incident, no memory of sitting at that table while that thing stood behind her, no memory of making that humming sound, nothing. And somehow, that makes it worse. The idea that something could take control of my friend so completely that she has no memory of it, that terrifies me more than anything. I still wake up sometimes at exactly 3:14 a.m., my heart racing, convinced I can hear that humming sound again. I never do, but I lie awake anyway, staring at my bedroom door, afraid of what might come through it. We've moved 3 times since college, and I always insist on an apartment with no windows in the kitchen. I still don't know what the hell we saw in that park. It's been almost 8 months since the last time we went there, and I still get goosebumps thinking about it. My girlfriend Layla won't even talk about it anymore. I need to get this off my chest because it's eating me alive, and maybe someone here has seen something similar. Layla and I had been dating for about a year when this started. We're both in our mid-20s, living in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Money's always tight, so our main entertainment was hanging out at this park about 15 minutes from our place. Nothing special, just a decent-sized public park with some playground equipment, a basketball court, and a walking trail that circles around and winds through some trees. The back section borders a small forest that's part of a nature preserve. We'd go there a couple times a week to smoke weed and just chill, especially during summer evenings when the park would empty out around sunset. There was this secluded bench near the back of the park that was perfect, hidden enough that we could smoke without bothering anyone, but not so isolated that it felt dangerous. At least, that's what we thought at first. The first time we saw it was in June. We'd been at the park for maybe an hour, just talking and passing a joint back and forth. It was that perfect twilight time, not dark yet, but the sun was definitely on its way down. I remember because the shadows were getting longer, and the park had that golden hour glow that makes everything look nicer than it actually is. I was in the middle of telling Layla about this stupid thing that happened at work when she suddenly grabbed my arm so hard that I felt her nails dig in. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. I followed her gaze and saw this massive black dog standing about 30 feet away, just watching us from between 2 trees. Except it wasn't exactly a dog. The size was all wrong. It was huge, more like a small bear than any dog breed I've ever seen. It had these weirdly round ears that stuck up like a teddy bear's, And its eyes, man, its eyes were this sickly yellowish color that seemed to glow in the fading light. The creepiest part was how still it was. It didn't pant, didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stared at us. "It's just a dog," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Maybe someone's pet got out. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't right. No dog stands that still for that long. No dog watches you with that kind of focus. We decided to leave. As we got up and started walking toward the parking lot, I kept glancing back over my shoulder. The thing followed us, not running or making any aggressive moves, just maintaining the exact same distance, watching us the whole time. When we'd go around a corner, I'd look back expecting it to be gone, but it would be there, still 30 feet behind us, still completely silent. We made it to the car, and I remember Layla's hands were shaking so badly she dropped the keys. When we finally got in and locked the doors, I looked out and saw it standing at the edge of the parking lot, those yellow eyes reflecting the streetlights. "What the actual fuck was that?" Layla said as we drove away. I didn't have an answer. We both tried to convince ourselves it was just a stray dog, maybe some weird mix of breeds we weren't familiar with. We even joked that we were just paranoid from the weed, but we knew better. About a week later, we went back. I know that sounds stupid, but the park was our spot, you know? And in the daylight, with other people around, the whole thing seemed silly. We convinced ourselves it was nothing. This time we went earlier, around 5 p.m. There were kids on the playground, people walking their dogs, normal park stuff. We sat at our usual bench, and everything was chill for about an hour. Then the park started emptying out as dinner time approached. That's when I got this weird feeling on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I turned around, and there it was again, standing at the edge of the trees, perfectly still, those yellow eyes fixed on us. In the daylight, it looked even more wrong somehow. Its fur was so black it seemed to absorb the sunlight around it, and its proportions were just off. The legs were too long, the head too big for its body. "Layla," I whispered, "don't freak out, but it's back." She turned slowly and went completely rigid beside me. "That's impossible," she mumbled. "That's the same fucking thing from last week." We weren't high this time, which made it worse. We couldn't blame it on paranoia or hallucinations. This thing was real, and it was watching us again. We decided to walk to the car, taking the long way around the playground where a few families were still hanging out. Safety in numbers, right? But as we walked, so did it, keeping that exact same distance, making no sound as it moved. The most unnerving thing was how it would sometimes disappear behind a tree or playground equipment, and when it should have emerged on the other side, it wasn't there. Then I'd spot it somewhere else entirely, still watching, still following. This pattern continued for weeks. We'd go to the park, sometimes smoking, sometimes not, and about half the time, that thing would show up. We started testing it, going at different times, sitting in different locations. It didn't seem to matter. If it was going to appear, it would find us. By mid-July, things escalated. The creature started getting closer, 20 feet away instead of 30, and its behavior changed. It began trying to position itself between us and the exit paths. There was one evening when we were sitting at a picnic table near the basketball courts. The sun was setting and the park was almost empty. I got up to throw away our fast food wrappers, and when I turned around, the thing was there, standing directly in the path back to Layla. It was maybe 15 feet away from me, completely silent as always. I froze. This was the closest I'd been to it, and I could see more details now. Its face wasn't quite right for a dog. The snout was too short, and there was something about its mouth that looked wrong, like it had too many teeth crammed in there. But the worst part was realizing that in all the times we'd seen this thing, I'd never once seen it blink. I slowly backed away, circling wide around it to get back to Layla. It turned its head to follow my movement, but didn't otherwise move. "We need to go. Now," I told her. As we hurried toward the parking lot, it followed more aggressively than before, keeping pace with us instead of maintaining distance. We had to cut across the grass and jog the last 100 yards to the car. By August, we were seriously debating whether to find a new park. But for some stupid reason, curiosity, stubbornness, I don't know, we kept going back. We just started taking precautions, only going during daylight hours, staying in the more populated areas, always keeping our keys in hand. The worst incident happened in late August. We'd gone to the park around 6 p.m. It was still plenty light out, and there were a fair number of people around. We decided to walk the trail that day, thinking movement might be safer than sitting still. The trail takes you through the main park area, then loops around to the back section that borders the forest. We'd made it about halfway around when the hair on my arms stood up. I didn't even need to look. I could feel it was there. Sure enough, when I turned, I saw it standing on the trail about 50 feet behind us. But this time, something was different. It seemed more substantial somehow, more present. And it was definitely closer than it had ever approached before. "Let's pick up the pace," I said to Layla, trying to keep my voice steady. We started walking faster, almost speed walking. The thing matched our pace exactly. When we reached the section of trail that runs along the edge of the forest, we were practically jogging. I made the mistake of looking back again, and it was gaining on us, moving with this unnatural, fluid motion that didn't look like any animal I've ever seen. The trail ahead had a sharp bend that would take us out of sight momentarily, and something told me we shouldn't let this thing follow us around that corner. I grabbed Layla's hand. "We need to cut through here," I said, pointing to a maintenance path that led back toward the center of the park. The path was blocked by a chain-link fence about 4 feet high with a no trespassing sign. But at that moment, trespassing seemed like the least of our worries. We ran to the fence, and I boosted Layla over first, then scrambled over myself. When I looked back, the thing was right at the fence, those yellow eyes level with mine. It made no attempt to jump or climb over. It just stood there, staring, its mouth slightly open now. I swear I could see rows of teeth going further back than should be possible. We didn't stop running until we reached the playground where a few families were still hanging out. We sat on a bench, trying to catch our breath and act normal. After about 20 minutes, we cautiously made our way to the parking lot, constantly checking behind us. We didn't see it again that day. The final straw came in early September. We'd been extra careful, only going to the park during busy times and staying in well-populated areas. We hadn't seen the thing for almost 2 weeks, and we stupidly started to think maybe it was gone for good. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the park was busier than usual with a community sports event happening on the main field. We decided to risk going to our old secluded bench, figuring with so many people around we'd be safe. We sat there for about an hour, and everything seemed fine. Then the sports event ended, and people started clearing out. We should have left then, but we were enjoying the peace and quiet. As the park emptied, I started getting that familiar feeling again. The dread crept up my spine before I even saw anything. When I finally worked up the nerve to look around, I didn't see it at first. Then movement caught my eye from the tree line that bordered the forest. It was there, partially hidden behind a large oak tree. But something was even more wrong this time. It was distorted somehow. Its proportions seemed to shift as I watched, like it couldn't decide what shape to be. The round ears seemed bigger, the legs longer, the body more massive. "Layla," I whispered, "don't look now, but it's back, and we need to leave right fucking now." She nodded without turning around, and we stood up casually, trying not to show fear. We started walking normally toward the main path, but I kept glancing back. Each time I looked, it had moved closer, and each time it seemed different, like it was struggling to maintain its form. We reached the main path that would take us back to the parking lot, but when I looked ahead, my heart sank. The thing was somehow there too, standing right in the middle of the path about 100 yards ahead of us. "How the fuck?" Layla breathed beside me. I looked back, and it was still there behind us too. Same yellow eyes, same black shape, same silent presence. Two of them, or the same one in two places at once. I don't know which is worse. We veered off the path immediately, cutting across the grass toward the basketball courts. From there, we could loop around to the parking lot. But as we approached the courts, we saw it again, standing at the corner, blocking our way. Panic hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed Layla's hand. "We need to run. Now." We sprinted across the grass toward the playground, hoping to find people, any people. But the playground was empty now. Beyond it was the fence that separated the park from the street, and beyond that, our car. As we ran, I looked back and saw not one, not two, but three of the same creature, converging on us from different directions. They moved with that same unnatural fluidity, covering ground faster than should be possible without actually running. We reached the fence, a 6-foot chain-link barrier. I boosted Layla up, and she scrambled over. I jumped, grabbing the top, and pulled myself over, landing hard on the other side. My ankle twisted, sending a shot of pain up my leg, but adrenaline kept me moving. We ran across the street to our car, and I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the unlock button. As we tumbled inside and locked the doors, I looked back at the park. They were lined up at the fence, 3 identical black shapes with yellow eyes. They didn't try to climb over, they just watched us. As I started the car and pulled away, they remained perfectly still, their gaze following us until we turned the corner. We haven't been back to that park since. We've tried other parks in the area, always staying in crowded areas, always leaving before dusk. So far, we haven't seen anything like that creature again. But sometimes, when I'm driving home late at night, I'll catch a glimpse of something dark moving at the edge of my headlights. Or I'll be taking out the trash and feel that same prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I'll turn, heart pounding, but there's never anything there. At least, nothing I can see. I still don't know what that thing was. It wasn't a dog or any animal I've ever seen. It moved wrong, felt wrong. It seemed to bend the rules of physical space, appearing in multiple places at once. And those eyes, they weren't just watching us. They were studying us. Whatever it was, I'm convinced it wasn't actually alive, at least not in the way we understand life. It felt like something else wearing the shape of a dog, something ancient and patient and utterly alien. And I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there, waiting. That one day I'll look up and see those yellow eyes staring at me through my window. I just needed to tell someone about this. Has anyone else seen anything similar? Am I losing my mind? Because that park is only 15 minutes from where we live, and sometimes I swear I can feel those eyes watching our apartment from the darkness. I've never been the type to get spooked easily. Growing up on the Pine Ridge Reservation, you get used to the isolation, the vastness, and the stories the elders tell. Stories meant to keep you safe, to remind you that there are things in this world we don't understand. I used to think they were just that, stories, until last summer when I experienced something I still can't explain. I've always loved taking walks at night. There's something about the silence, the way the reservation transforms under the moonlight. The cedar, oak, elm, and cottonwood trees that line the dry creek beds create these weird shadows that dance across the ground. The air smells different at night, cleaner, cooler, like it carries secrets from miles away. My parents never minded my night walks. They knew I needed space to think, to process. Being 17 on a reservation isn't easy. There's not much to do, nowhere to go. Those walks were my escape. Last July, I went out for one of my usual walks around 9 p.m. It was hot that day, but the temperature had finally dropped enough to be comfortable. I followed my regular route down past the community center, then cut through the field behind Old Man Wilson's place and into the stretch of woods that runs alongside Eagle Creek, though it's been dry for years now. I remember feeling particularly restless that night. School was out for summer, and I'd spent the day helping my uncle fix his truck. My mind was racing with thoughts about college applications, about whether I'd actually leave the reservation next year. I walked for maybe an hour, going deeper into the wooded area than I normally would. When I got home around 10:30, something felt off right away. All the dogs in the neighborhood were going crazy, barking, howling. Not just one or two, but all of them, like a wave of agitation spreading from house to house. Our own dog, Rusty, was pacing the yard, his hackles raised, refusing to come when I called him. My dad was sitting on the porch in the dark. No lights, no phone, just sitting there staring out into the night. He didn't acknowledge me at first, and I almost thought he was asleep with his eyes open. "Dad?" I said, climbing the porch steps. He turned slowly, like he was coming out of a trance. "You're back. Good." That was it. He stood up, patted my shoulder, and went inside. I followed, confused by his behavior. My mom was already asleep, and the house was quiet except for the muffled sound of the dogs still barking outside. The next day passed normally. I helped my dad with some repairs on the roof, ate dinner with my parents, then got ready for another walk. It was around the same time, just after sunset, when the sky turns that deep, impossible blue before going black. I was lacing up my shoes by the door when my dad appeared in the hallway. "Not tonight," he said. His voice was firm in a way that surprised me. "Why not?" "I'm just going for a walk." He motioned for me to follow him to the porch. We sat in the two weathered chairs that have been there since before I was born. The night was settling in around us, the crickets starting their evening chorus. "I need to tell you something," he said, staring straight ahead. "Something that happened to me when I was about your age. My dad isn't the storytelling type. He's quiet, practical, the kind of man who communicates through actions, not words. So when he started talking, I knew it was important. He told me that when he was 17, he used to ride his horse to visit friends after finishing his chores. One night in late summer, he was riding home under a rising moon. The reservation was different then. Fewer houses, more open space, darker at night, without all the security lights people have now. His horse, a bay gelding named Thunder, was usually steady and calm, but that night, as they approached a dry creek bed lined with old cottonwoods, the horse stopped abruptly. My dad said Thunder's ears were pricked forward, his whole body tense. Then my dad noticed it too, something white moving among the trees below, in the creek bed. At first, I thought it was just a piece of trash blowing in the wind, my dad said, his voice low. But there wasn't any wind that night. The air was still hot. As he watched, the white thing moved again, more deliberately this time. Then suddenly it jumped up and flew toward him. Thunder reared, nearly throwing my dad off, then bolted forward in panic. After about 20 feet, my dad managed to get the horse under control enough to look back. Rising from the creek bed was a massive white owl, but not just any owl. This one had a wingspan as long as his horse and a body that must have been 3 feet long. My dad said he'd never seen anything like it before or since. The owl flew directly over them, so close that my dad could feel the air from its wings. Then it disappeared, flying toward the moon until he couldn't see it anymore. Thunder was still skittish, but my dad convinced him to keep going. They made it to the top of a hill where you could see our family's house in the distance. That's when the horse spooked again, this time at something on a haystack in the alfalfa field that belonged to our family. Thunder bolted again, heading straight for home. When they reached the yard, my dad barely had time to dismount before the horse raced behind the house to where the other horses were kept. My dad went inside and told his mother, my grandmother, what had happened. As he was explaining, the dogs started barking, all of them, just like they had been the night before when I came home. My grandfather grabbed his rifle and went outside to investigate. He walked to the haystack where my dad had seen something unusual. What my grandfather found there changes according to who's telling the story. But the way my dad told it to me that night, my grandfather saw a creature standing by the haystack. It was man-like, but hairy, standing about 7 feet tall. My grandfather raised his rifle but didn't fire. He just watched as the creature slowly turned and walked away, moving at first like a man, then dropping to all fours and moving with incredible speed. When my dad finished his story, we sat in silence for a while. The night had grown fully dark around us. The white owl was a messenger, he finally said, a warning about what was coming. My father told me that night that when you see an owl like that, it means something is going to happen, something important. I didn't know what to say. I'd heard stories about skinwalkers my whole life, creatures that could transform between human and animal forms, that brought bad luck or death. But I'd always thought of them as just stories, legends created to explain the unexplainable. Did anything happen after that night? I asked. My dad nodded slowly. 3 days later, we got a call that my aunt, my mother's sister, had fallen ill suddenly. She died a week later. The weight of his words hung in the air between us. He wasn't telling me this story to scare me, I realized. He was warning me. The dogs last night, I said, understanding dawning. You think it means something's here? I don't know, he admitted. But when every dog for a mile starts barking at once, something's not right. I didn't go for a walk that night. Or the next. For a week, I stayed close to home after dark, watching my dad check the property boundaries every evening before sunset, noticing how my mom placed cedar bundles near the windows and doors. On the 8th day after my dad told me his story, we got a call. My mom's brother had been in a car accident on Highway 18. He survived, but barely, spending 3 weeks in the ICU in Rapid City. I can't prove the two things are connected. Maybe they're not. Maybe it's just coincidence that the dogs went crazy, that my dad felt compelled to share his experience with me, and then something terrible happened to our family. But since that night, I've noticed white owls. Not the massive, impossible creature my dad described, but regular barn owls that seem to appear at significant moments. When my cousin announced she was pregnant. When my grandfather went into the hospital for heart surgery. when I received my acceptance letter to South Dakota State. I still take walks at night sometimes, but I'm more cautious now. I pay attention to the dogs, to the feeling in the air, to the shadows that move differently than they should. I listen for wings. Last week, I was sitting on our porch around midnight, unable to sleep because of the heat. In the distance, I heard an owl call, that distinctive, eerie sound cutting through the darkness. I felt a chill despite the warm night. The next morning, my mom got a call that her cousin had passed away unexpectedly in her sleep. Now, when the sun sets on Pine Ridge, I watch the skies. I'm not afraid exactly, just aware. The elders always said that white owls on the reservation are messengers, harbingers of significant events that will affect your family. Not always death, but always something that changes you. I don't know if what's out there is a skinwalker or just an owl doing what owls do. I don't know if my dad really saw a 7-foot creature by the haystack or if it was shadows and imagination. But I do know that some things can't be explained away, no matter how hard you try. The dogs haven't gone crazy like that again, at least not all at once. But sometimes, when I'm about to fall asleep, I hear a single bark outside my window, alert, alarmed, and I find myself holding my breath, listening for wings in the darkness. I still feel that chill go up my spine every time I think about what happened in those woods. I've spent most of my life trying to forget it, but there are some things you just can't shake no matter how hard you try. I grew up in a small town in central Idaho, one of those places you've never heard of, with more trees than people. We had a wood stove that heated our whole house through the winter, and my dad was determined to never pay for firewood when we could cut it ourselves. So every fall, after school and on weekends, my dad would take me and my 2 younger brothers up into the mountains to cut and collect wood for the coming winter. We'd been doing this routine since I was old enough to carry logs, drive up some logging road, find a place where the Forest Service had marked trees for cutting or where deadfall was plentiful, spend a few hours filling up the truck, and head back down. It was hard work, but I kind of enjoyed it. There was something satisfying about the rhythm of splitting wood, the smell of fresh pine, and knowing we were taking care of ourselves. This particular day started like any other wood-gathering trip. It was late October, and winter was coming faster than usual. My dad picked us up early from school. Me, my brother Jake, who was 14, and our youngest brother Mikey, who was 11. I was 16 and had been operating the chainsaw for about a year by then. "Let's try the other side of the valley today," my dad said, as we threw our backpacks in the truck. "Heard from Bill down at the hardware store there's a new logging road that goes up pretty far. Might find some good deadfall up there." This wasn't our usual spot. We typically went to Thompson Ridge or up past Miller Creek, places we knew well. But my dad was always looking for better wood, and we had permits for the whole county, so why not? The drive took about an hour, winding through dirt roads until we found the turnoff for the new logging path. It was rougher than our usual roads, less traveled, with branches scraping against the sides of our old Ford F-150. The truck lurched and bounced as we made our way higher up the mountain. I remember the forest changing as we climbed. The trees got denser, taller, older, less sunlight breaking through. The usual ponderosa pines gave way to thick firs and spruce. Everything just felt different, older somehow. About halfway up, I started feeling strange. Not sick exactly, just uncomfortable. Like when you walk into a room where people were just arguing and now they're silent. That tension in the air. I figured it was just being in an unfamiliar place, so I didn't say anything. We were probably 5 miles up this narrow dirt road when Mikey spoke up from the back seat. "Dad, I don't think we're supposed to be here." My dad glanced in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean, Bud?" "I don't know. It feels like the mountain doesn't want us here." I felt a chill when he said that, because it was exactly what I'd been thinking. This wasn't just unfamiliar territory. It felt unwelcoming, like the forest knew we were there and was watching us. My dad laughed it off. "Mountains don't have feelings, Mikey. We've got our permits. We're allowed to be here." But I noticed his knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and he kept glancing into the trees as we drove. Dad wasn't one to spook easily, but something had him on edge too. We finally reached a small clearing about 7 miles up. Dad parked the truck, and we all climbed out. The air was colder up there, but dead still. No bird sounds, no squirrels chattering, just silence. Even the wind seemed to have died. "All right, boys, let's get to work," Dad said, pulling the chainsaw from the truck bed. "Plenty of deadfall around here. Should make for easy pickings." He was right about the deadfall. There were more fallen trees than I'd expect. Some looked like they'd been deliberately pulled down, not just fallen naturally, but the wood was good and dry, perfect for burning. As we started working, I couldn't shake that feeling of being unwelcome. It was like a pressure on my chest, making it hard to breathe normally. I kept looking over my shoulder, convinced someone was watching me from the trees. Every time I'd turn, there'd be nothing there, but the feeling never went away. I noticed Jake was doing the same thing, working fast, eyes darting around. Even my dad seemed rushed, not taking his usual time to select the best pieces. Only Mikey seemed somewhat normal, though he stayed closer to Dad than usual. About 2 hours in, the light started changing. It wasn't that late, maybe 4:30 p.m., but the forest was getting dark fast. The trees were so dense that twilight came early up there. Dad checked his watch and frowned. "Let's pack it up and head back," he said. "All ready?" I asked. Normally we wouldn't leave until the truck was completely full and we were only about half done. "Yeah, I don't like the look of the sky. Might snow." I glanced up. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, just the fading light filtering through the trees. But I wasn't about to argue. Something felt very wrong in those woods, and I was ready to leave. We loaded the last few pieces we'd cut and secured everything with ropes. My dad did a final check, which was unusual. He was being extra careful, almost nervous. Then we all piled back into the truck. As the engine started, I felt a momentary relief. We were leaving this place. But that relief was short-lived. The truck's headlights cut through the growing darkness as we started back down the mountain. The logging road was steep with sharp switchbacks, forcing my dad to navigate slowly. Every turn felt like it took us deeper into the forest instead of out of it. We'd gone about 2 miles down when it happened. We were coming around a sharp bend when something big and brown jumped right in front of our truck. Dad slammed on the brakes, and we skidded on the loose gravel. I heard a thud as we hit whatever it was. "Shit!" Dad cursed, which was rare for him. "I think we hit a deer." He turned to us, his face tense in the dim light. "Stay in the truck. I need to check if it's still alive." "I'll come with you," I said, reaching for my door handle. I was trying to be helpful, but honestly, I didn't want him out there alone. Dad hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but you two stay put," he told my brothers. The air outside was even colder now, and the silence more complete. The truck's headlights illuminated a patch of road about 20 feet ahead, where a brown mass lay motionless. My dad and I approached cautiously, him slightly ahead of me. As we got closer, I could see it was indeed a deer, a doe, medium-sized. But something was off. The way it lay there wasn't right. It didn't look like it had just been hit. My dad must have noticed too, because he slowed down, approaching more carefully. When we were about 5 feet away, the full horror of what we were looking at hit me all at once. The deer was already dead, had been dead for days. Its body was bloated and decomposing, with patches of fur missing. Maggots crawled in and out of its flesh. The eyes were gone, just empty sockets staring at nothing, and its black tongue hung swollen from its mouth. But the worst part? There was no way we had hit this deer. It hadn't jumped in front of our truck. It had been placed there while we were braking, or thrown. I looked at my dad, about to ask what the hell was going on, when I saw the expression on his face. Pure terror. He was staring past the deer carcass into the trees beside the road. I followed his gaze but couldn't see anything in the darkness. "Get back to the truck," he whispered, so quietly I barely heard him. "Now, don't run. Just walk." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I turned and started walking back to the truck, every instinct screaming at me to run. I could hear my dad right behind me, his breathing fast and shallow. We were maybe 10 feet from the truck when we heard it, a high-pitched shrieking sound coming from the trees, unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It wasn't an animal sound, at least not any animal I knew. It was followed by the crack and snap of branches breaking, like something large was moving rapidly through the forest toward us. "Run!" my dad shouted, shoving me forward. I sprinted the last few steps to the truck and yanked open the door, practically diving inside. My brothers were wide-eyed and pale. Through the windshield, I saw my dad running toward us, his face contorted with fear. As he reached the driver's side door, there was another shriek, closer this time. Dad jumped in, slammed the door, and cranked the engine. He threw the truck into drive and floored it, not even waiting to see if we were all buckled in. The truck lurched forward, bumping over the deer carcass with a sickening thud. In the side mirror, I caught a glimpse of something moving at the edge of the headlight's reach. A dark shape, too big to be a normal animal, but I couldn't make out details. Dad didn't slow down for the switchbacks, taking them so fast that we slid on the gravel and nearly went off the edge more than once. None of us spoke. The only sounds were the roar of the engine and the crunch of gravel under tires. The shrieking followed us down the mountain, sometimes sounding like it was right behind us, other times off to the side. Whatever was making that sound was keeping pace with our truck on a steep, winding road. It wasn't until we hit the desert sagebrush at the bottom of the mountain, leaving the tree line behind, that the shrieking finally stopped. Dad kept driving at full speed for another 10 minutes before finally easing off the gas. The ride home was dead silent. My brothers were huddled together in the back seat. I sat rigid, staring out the window, half expecting to see something running alongside us. Dad's hands never loosened their death grip on the steering wheel. When we finally turned onto our property, almost an hour later, Dad stopped the truck in front of our house and turned to face us all. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steadier than I expected. "That deer was dead long before we got there. Something threw it in front of our truck." "What do you mean, something threw it?" Jake asked, his voice cracking. Dad took a deep breath. "All day I kept seeing, shadows, movement behind trees. I thought it was just animals, but they were too big, too deliberate. Something was watching us, following us. I think it was trying to ambush us." "What was it?" Mikey whispered. "I don't know," Dad admitted, "and I don't want to know. But we're not going back to that mountain. Ever." He wasn't lying. We never went back. We got our firewood from Thompson Ridge for the rest of that winter and all the winters after until I left for college. Dad never talked about what happened again, but I know he told Mom because I overheard them whispering about it that night. About a year later, I heard the Forest Service closed that logging road, reclaimed it, said it was for environmental concerns. I always wondered if someone else had an experience up there. To this day, I don't know what was on that mountain. I don't know if it was a person, an animal, or something else entirely. But I know it was intelligent. It knew we didn't belong there, and it wanted us gone. Or maybe it wanted us dead. Sometimes when I'm out in the woods, I still get that feeling of being watched. And every time, I remember that day, that carcass, and that inhuman shriek chasing us down the mountain. And I leave, immediately, because some places in this world aren't meant for us. And that mountain, something lives there that doesn't want to be found. It's been almost a year now. 2 days from now will mark exactly 1 year since my niece Bethany was taken. She would have turned 10 the day after Christmas. I've never told the full story before because I know how it sounds. The police think I'm crazy. My sister killed herself 4 months ago because no one believed us. But I need to get this out there because I think it's coming back for me now. I've been hearing noises in my apartment for the past week. Little scratching sounds in the walls. That same horrible giggle I heard that night. Christmas is coming, and I'm terrified. This all started last December when I was visiting my sister and Bethany for the holidays. I'd come to stay with them for Christmas week, like I always did. Bethany was so excited for Christmas. She loved everything about it. The tree, the presents, the cookies. She was such a happy kid normally. But last Christmas, something was different. The first night I got there, I noticed Bethany wasn't her usual self. She was quiet during dinner, kept looking over her shoulder at the hallway leading to her bedroom. When I asked her what was wrong, she just shook her head and wouldn't say anything in front of her mom. Later that night, when I went to tuck her in, a tradition we had since she was little, she grabbed my arm so tight it left marks. "Aunt Jenny, there's an elf in my room," she whispered. I thought she meant one of those elf-on-the-shelf things, but we'd never done that in our family. I smiled and told her not to worry, that elves were nice. She shook her head frantically. "Not this one. This one hides in my closet and under my bed. It bites me when I try to get out of bed at night." I figured she was just having nightmares, so I checked under her bed and in the closet to show her nothing was there. I told her to call for me if she got scared during the night. The next morning, Bethany was exhausted at breakfast. She had dark circles under her eyes and kept nodding off into her cereal. When I asked if she'd slept okay, she just shook her head and whispered, "It wouldn't let me." My sister Sarah mentioned that Bethany had been having sleep issues for about 3 weeks. She thought it was just excitement about Christmas, but she was starting to worry about her. Sarah was a single mom doing her best, working 2 jobs to keep them afloat. She didn't have time for much else. That afternoon, when Sarah was at work, Bethany and I were watching Christmas movies in the living room. Out of nowhere, she pulled up her pajama pants and showed me her ankles and feet. I nearly threw up. They were covered in deep bite marks and scars, some fresh and some healing. They weren't animal bites. They looked human-sized, but with way too many teeth marks. "The elf does this when I try to get out of bed," she said, so matter-of-factly it chilled me to the bone. "It says if I tell Mommy it'll bite her too." I took pictures of the bites with my phone and called Sarah immediately. She came home early, and we took Bethany to the emergency room. The doctor seemed concerned and asked a lot of questions about pets or if Bethany had been hurting herself. There was no way these were self-inflicted. Some of the bites were on the backs of her heels where she couldn't reach. They gave her antibiotics for the infections and referred her to a child psychiatrist. Sarah was devastated. She thought she'd failed her daughter somehow. I stayed with Bethany while Sarah made calls to get her an emergency appointment with a psychiatrist. Bethany just sat there, staring at the Christmas tree, mumbling something I couldn't quite hear. When we got home, I decided to sleep in Bethany's room that night. I brought in a sleeping bag and set it up next to her bed. She seemed relieved but still frightened. "It won't come if you're here," she said, "but it'll be mad tomorrow." I didn't sleep much that night. I kept watching Bethany and checking the closet and under the bed. Nothing happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. The next day was December 23rd. Sarah took Bethany to the psychiatrist while I stayed behind to wrap presents. The house felt wrong when I was alone in it. I kept hearing little scurrying noises like something small running across the attic or in the walls. I told myself it was just mice. When they got back, Sarah told me the psychiatrist thought Bethany might be experiencing extreme anxiety manifesting in delusions. He prescribed some medication to help her sleep and recommended daily therapy sessions after the holidays. Bethany didn't say much about the appointment, but she seemed more withdrawn than before. That night, I slept in her room again. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to Bethany sobbing quietly in her bed. When I asked what was wrong, she said, "It's in the closet right now. It's watching us." I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight and opened the closet door. Nothing was there, but the clothes were arranged differently than they had been when I'd checked earlier. I sat with Bethany until she fell back asleep, telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Christmas Eve arrived. Sarah had to work a half day, so it was just me and Bethany again. I tried to keep her spirits up by baking cookies and watching her favorite movies, but she kept staring into space. At one point, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Aunt Jenny, it told me last night that it's going to take me away on Christmas. It said it's going to wear my skin." I hugged her tight and promised I wouldn't let anything happen to her. I was genuinely scared now, not of some imaginary elf, but of what might be happening to Bethany's mental health, or worse, if someone was actually hurting her. That night, Christmas Eve, Sarah asked if I would stay in Bethany's room again. She was worried about Bethany's state of mind and thought having me there might help her sleep. Of course I agreed. Bethany and I made a fort with extra blankets in her room. I thought making it feel like a fun sleepover might help ease her fears. She seemed slightly better as we read The Night Before Christmas together. She eventually fell asleep around 9 p.m., clearly exhausted from weeks of poor sleep. I must have dozed off too because I woke up to Bethany shaking my shoulder around midnight. "I'm thirsty," she whispered. "Can we get some water?" I was grateful she wanted me to go with her rather than going alone. As we got up, she grabbed my hand tight. "We have to be quiet," she said. "It's out there." I felt a chill run down my spine, but told myself to stay calm for her sake. We stepped into the hallway, and that's when I saw it. At the end of the hall, partially hidden in the shadows by the bathroom, was what looked like a small figure. It was about 3 feet tall, humanoid, wearing what seemed like a dirty red and green outfit. But its face wasn't right. In the dim nightlight from the bathroom, I could see it had too many teeth, all pointed and crowded in its mouth, like it had 3 sets instead of 1. Its eyes were blank white, no pupils, and its skin was a sickly grayish color. I froze. Bethany whimpered beside me. I thought I was hallucinating from lack of sleep, but then the thing grinned wider than any human mouth could stretch and made a soft, giggling sound. I pushed Bethany behind me and reached for my phone to take a picture, thinking no one would believe us without evidence. As soon as the flash went off, the thing started moving, not walking, but scuttling rapidly on all fours across the ceiling toward us. Everything happened so fast after that. Bethany screamed and pushed me hard, causing me to stumble backward into her bedroom. Before I could regain my balance, the door slammed shut between us. I heard the lock click from the outside. I pounded on the door, screaming Bethany's name. I could hear a high-pitched voice outside, screeching what sounded like, "Merry Creepiness, Merry Creepiness," over and over, followed by Bethany's terrified screams. Sarah came running from her room, asking what was happening. I told her to call 911 while I tried to break down the door. It wouldn't budge. The screaming on the other side was getting worse. Bethany was shrieking in pain now. Sarah was frozen in shock, so I grabbed the phone from her hand and called 911 myself, telling them we needed help immediately, that someone was attacking my niece. While on the phone, I ran to get a screwdriver from the kitchen. I came back and started making a hole in the door near the lock. The screaming had stopped by then, replaced by a wet, ripping sound that I'll never forget as long as I live. When I finally got the door unlocked and carefully pushed it open, the scene inside will haunt me forever. Bethany was on the floor, her body split vertically from throat to navel. The elf thing was hovering over her, wearing what looked like her intestines around its neck, like a grotesque Christmas garland, eating them while making obscene slurping noises. It looked up at me with those blank white eyes, bits of my niece's insides hanging from its mouth, and smiled. Then it scurried up the wall and into the air vent in the ceiling, moving impossibly fast. Sarah saw everything too. She collapsed in the doorway, making this horrible keening sound I'd never heard a human make before. I dropped beside Bethany, trying to hold her together, knowing it was too late. Blood was everywhere, on the walls, the ceiling, soaking the carpet. The police arrived within minutes. I was still holding Bethany's body, covered in her blood. But when the officers entered the room, they stopped and looked confused. Sarah was still screaming in the doorway, but I realized she was now staring at an empty floor. Bethany's body was gone. So was all the blood. The room looked completely normal, bed neatly made, no sign of the carnage that had been there seconds before. The police searched the house, clearly thinking we were both having some kind of psychotic episode. They found no trace of Bethany, no blood, no signs of struggle, and certainly no creature. The next few weeks were a nightmare. The police conducted a missing persons investigation, but they clearly suspected either Sarah or me had done something to Bethany. They found no evidence of forced entry, no fingerprints besides our own, nothing to suggest anyone else had been in the house. The picture I'd taken with my phone just showed an empty hallway. Child services came. Sarah was investigated. I was questioned repeatedly. Our family was torn apart. Everyone thought one of us had snapped and done something to Bethany, then concocted this insane story about an elf. That night, after the police finally left, I heard it again in Bethany's empty room, a whispered "Merry Creepiness" that made my blood freeze. When I rushed in, the room was empty, but the air vent cover was slightly ajar. Sarah never recovered. She was admitted to a psychiatric facility in February after multiple suicide attempts. The police investigation stalled without evidence. In August, Sarah managed to hang herself in the hospital bathroom. I was her only visitor at the funeral. Now it's almost Christmas again, and I've been hearing those same scurrying sounds in my apartment walls. Last night, I woke up to find my ankles bleeding from what looked like bite marks. I've set up cameras everywhere, but something tells me they won't capture anything. I'm writing this because I need someone to know what really happened to Bethany if the same thing happens to me. I've started hearing that whispered "Merry Creepin' in my kitchen at night. I don't think I'm going to make it to Christmas. If you ever hear your children talking about elves that aren't the normal kind, please, please believe them. Don't make the same mistake we did. Christmas is only 3 days away, and I'm terrified of what's hiding in my walls, waiting to make me its next Christmas feast. I still get goosebumps when I think about that summer night in Chenley. It's been over 10 years, but I swear sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like something is staring at me from the darkness. I've never shared this with anyone outside my family and those who were there that night. I'm only writing it down now because maybe someone else has experienced something similar and can make sense of what happened to us. It was July, hot as hell even at night, and we were camping in my family's backyard. Not real camping, just sleeping outside because the house was too stuffy without AC. There were 5 of us, me, my sister Emma, my friend Jake from school, and my 2 cousins Mia and Danny. We had this whole setup with my dad's pickup truck and our old family van. Us girls were going to sleep in the truck bed with sleeping bags and pillows while the guys took the van. My parents' property sits at the edge of town, backing up to this dry creek bed and then some hills beyond that. Our closest neighbors, the Tuckers, lived across the creek, maybe a quarter mile away. They had these 3 German shepherds that barked at literally everything, but you got used to it after a while. We had spent the evening roasting marshmallows, telling stupid ghost stories, and just hanging out like normal teenagers. Around midnight, my parents went inside to sleep, and we all settled into our spots. The boys crashed pretty quickly in the van, but us girls stayed up talking in the truck bed. I must have fallen asleep first, because what happened next, I only know from what my sister Emma told me. She's always been into astronomy and was still awake around 2 a.m. just looking at the stars. The night was clear, and out there in Chenley, away from big city lights, you can see everything. That's when she first noticed the Tuckers' dogs going crazy. Not their normal barking, this was different, more frantic, more afraid. Emma said she felt weird, like something was watching her. She thought it was probably just the ghost stories getting to her. But then she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. She turned her head slowly toward the cab of the pickup and froze. There was someone, or something, crouched on top of the truck's cab, staring down at her. The way she described it later, it was like a person, but wrong. Too thin, with limbs that seemed longer than they should be. It was dark, but she could see it was crouched in this unnatural position, almost like a spider. And its eyes, she said they reflected the moonlight like an animal's. Emma tried to scream. She tried to move, but she couldn't. It was like her body just shut down completely. She said it felt like being underwater. She could see and hear, but couldn't move a muscle or make a sound. She couldn't even blink. The thing just stared at her, not moving, just watching. How long this went on, she doesn't know. Could have been seconds or minutes. Then my cousin Mia suddenly sat up next to her. Mia later told us she woke up with this overwhelming feeling of dread, like something terrible was about to happen. She hadn't seen anything yet. She just woke up feeling scared. The moment Mia sat up, it was like whatever spell had been holding Emma broke. She could move again, and she screamed. I mean screamed, the kind that makes your blood run cold. I jolted awake to Emma and Mia both freaking out. My other cousin was awake by then, too. "There was someone on the truck," Emma kept saying. It was watching us. I looked around but didn't see anything. The boys came stumbling out of the van, half asleep and confused. My parents rushed outside from the house. Everyone was talking at once. Emma was crying and shaking so hard she could barely speak. My dad thought it might be some local kid playing a prank, but the way Emma described what she saw, I don't know any person who could move like that or had eyes that reflected light. Plus, we were pretty isolated out there. Not exactly a place teenagers would randomly wander to at 2 a.m. After calming down a bit, Emma, Mia, and I decided to look around with a flashlight while my dad checked on the boys and made sure the van was locked. My mom stayed with my youngest cousin, who was pretty scared. The three of us didn't go far, just around the yard, sweeping the flashlight beam across the property. We were huddled together, jumping at every little sound. The Tuckers' dogs were still barking non-stop across the creek. That's when we saw it. Something moving up the hill behind our property. The flashlight only caught it for a second. This dark figure moving fast, really fast, in this weird, jerky way. Not running like a person runs, more like skittering. It disappeared over the top of the hill before we could get a good look. We ran back to my parents and told them what we saw. My dad, being the protective type, grabbed his shotgun from the house. He told us to go inside while he checked things out. I remember my mom trying to stop him, saying it wasn't safe, but he insisted. He took the flashlight and headed toward the hill. We waited inside, terrified. Emma was still shaking. She kept saying, "It wasn't human. The way it moved wasn't right." About 20 minutes later, my dad came back. He hadn't found anything, no footprints, no signs that anyone had been there. He checked the truck, checked around the whole property. Nothing. By this point, it was almost 3 a.m. We were all too scared to go back outside, so everyone crammed into the living room to sleep. The boys took the floor, us girls squeezed onto the couch, and my parents sat up in chairs, keeping watch. I must have dozed off eventually, because I was woken up around 4:30 a.m. by Emma shaking my arm. "Listen," she whispered. At first I didn't hear anything. Then I caught it, this low rhythmic sound coming from outside. It sounded like someone speaking, but in a language I didn't recognize. The voice was deep and raspy, coming from the direction of the hill. Emma looked at me with wide eyes. "That's old Navajo," she whispered. Our grandmother was part Navajo, and though we didn't speak it, we recognized the sound of it from when our great-uncle would visit. But this didn't sound like our great-uncle. This sounded wrong, like someone trying to speak the language but not quite getting it right, too guttural, with pauses in weird places. We woke up Mia, and the three of us crept to the window. We couldn't see anything outside. It was still dark, but the voice continued. It would speak for a few seconds, then stop, then start again, like some kind of chant or prayer. That's when we heard my mom's voice from their bedroom. She was talking in her sleep, which wasn't unusual for her, but what she was saying sent chills down my spine. "Jesus, protect this house. Jesus, protect my children. No evil shall enter here. In Jesus' name, be gone." Over and over, like a prayer. And each time she said Jesus' name, the voice outside would stop for a moment, then start again, a little farther away. We rushed to my parents' room. My mom was sitting up in bed, eyes closed, still repeating those words. My dad was trying to wake her up. The moment we entered their room, I smelled it. Like roadkill that's been sitting in the sun for days. So strong it made my eyes water. It seemed to be coming from the back door, which was visible from my parents' bedroom. Emma felt it too. She grabbed my arm and pointed toward the back door. I didn't see anything, but the smell was overwhelming. Then my mom said, "Jesus," again in her sleep, louder this time, and the smell disappeared. Just like that. Gone. My dad finally managed to wake my mom up. She had no memory of what she had been saying, but she looked scared. We told her about the voice we'd heard and the smell. Her face went pale. "We need to pray," she said. So we did, all of us, right there in their bedroom, even though the boys weren't particularly religious. We prayed until the sun came up. In the morning light, everything seemed less terrifying. My dad and Jake went outside to check around again. They found something on the hill where we'd seen the figure disappear. A flattened patch of grass, perfectly circular, about the size of a person sitting cross-legged. No footprints leading to or from it, though the ground was hard and rocky in most places. I went with Emma to get our stuff from the pickup truck. Our sleeping bags were still there, and our pillows. Emma reached for her sandals that she'd left in the truck bed, and that's when she found it. Tangled around the strap of her sandal was a clump of hair. Long, coarse, black hair. Frizzy and wild-looking. It wasn't from any of us. We all had different hair types, and this was different. It felt almost brittle, like it would crumble if you squeezed it too hard. We showed it to my mom. I'll never forget the look on her face, pure fear. She grabbed it from Emma's hand and marched straight to the kitchen stove. "This is a skinwalker's hair," she said, her voice shaking. "A Yi Naldlushi practicing bad medicine." She threw it into the stove and lit the burner. Burning it is the only way to break their connection. The hair caught fire immediately, burning with an odd bluish flame and giving off that same rotting smell we'd noticed in the night. My mom kept praying as it burned. Later she explained what she thought had happened. In Navajo tradition, skinwalkers are medicine men who've gone bad, using their power to harm others. They can take animal forms or appear almost human, but with animal-like features. They're drawn to family groups, especially when there are children or young people present. My mom believed the skinwalker had targeted us that night. Maybe it had been watching us for days. Emma had encountered it directly, which is why she couldn't move or speak. That paralysis is something skinwalkers can cause in their victims. The voice we heard was it performing some kind of ritual on the hill, possibly trying to place a curse on our family. And my mom, even in her sleep, had sensed the danger and started praying, which kept it from entering our house. I don't know what to make of all this. Part of me wants to dismiss it as collective hysteria or some weird prank, but I can't explain everything. The paralysis Emma experienced, the way that thing moved on the hill, the strange hair, my mom's sleep-talking that seemed to keep whatever it was at bay. We never slept outside again after that night. The next day, my uncle came and blessed the property with sage and prayers. The Tuckers' dogs stopped their frantic barking, though they did run away about a week later and were never found. Sometimes I wonder if that thing is still out there, watching and waiting. I've read about similar experiences in the area, usually dismissed as legends or campfire stories. But I know what we experienced was real. I still live in Arizona, but I've never gone back to Chenley. I can't. Just thinking about those hills behind my parents' property makes my skin crawl. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night and pass through an isolated area, I find myself checking my rearview mirror more often than necessary, half expecting to see a pair of reflective eyes staring back at me from the darkness. I've never been someone who believed in ghost stories or legends. I'm practical to a fault, the kind of guy who needs to see something with my own eyes to believe it. Well, in 2016, I saw something with my own eyes that I still can't explain, and I'm writing this because I need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar. My girlfriend Lauren and I were doing a road trip through Utah in mid-June 2016. We're from Michigan originally, so the desert landscape was totally foreign to us. Beautiful, but eerie. We had our chocolate lab Cookie with us, who was about 4 years old at the time and the sweetest dog you'd ever meet. Usually. We'd spent the day hiking and taking pictures around Moab, planning to hit Goblin Valley State Park the next morning. By evening, we were exhausted, but still about an hour away from our planned campsite. Lauren was already dozing in the passenger seat of my old Ford F-150, and Cookie was sprawled across the back seat. It must have been around 2 a.m. when I realized I needed a break. The roads out there are so dark, and after driving for hours with nothing but my headlights illuminating the road ahead, my eyes were starting to play tricks on me. I spotted a pull-out area just off the highway, not an official rest stop, just a wide dirt area where people sometimes park to take in the view during daylight hours. I pulled in and cut the engine. Lauren was completely out by then, head against the window, small puffs of breath fogging the glass. I decided to let her sleep while I stepped out to stretch my legs and have a cigarette. I don't smoke regularly anymore, but back then I still kept a pack for long drives. The moment I stepped out of the truck, something felt off. It's hard to describe if you've never been in the desert at night, but there's usually some ambient noise, crickets, distant coyotes, the whisper of wind. That night, there was absolute silence, the kind of silence that makes your ears strain for something, anything. The moon was nearly full, casting this pale blue light across the landscape. I could make out the silhouettes of rock formations in the distance and some scrubby juniper bushes scattered around the pullout. I remember thinking how alien it all looked, like I'd stepped onto another planet. I lit my cigarette and walked about 20 feet from the truck, just enjoying the stillness and the stars, which were incredible out there with no light pollution. The air was still warm from the day, with that dry desert heat that feels nothing like the muggy summers back home. I'd been standing there maybe 5 minutes when Cookie suddenly started growling from inside the truck. Not her usual "someone's at the door" growl. This was deep, primal, coming from her chest. At first, I figured she'd spotted a coyote or maybe a deer. I turned to head back to the truck when I heard it. "Come look over here, baby." It was Lauren's voice, unmistakably hers, with that slight rasp she gets when she's tired. But it wasn't coming from the truck. It was coming from the darkness beyond the pullout, maybe 30 yards away, where some large rocks created shadows the moonlight couldn't reach. I froze. My brain couldn't process what was happening. Lauren was asleep in the truck. I could still see her silhouette through the window. There's no way she could have gotten past me without me noticing. Yet her voice had been crystal clear. "Lauren!" I called out, my voice sounding way too loud in the silence. "Over here," came the reply in that same familiar voice. "You need to see this." Cookie's growling turned into full-on vicious barking now. I'd never heard her make sounds like that before. She was throwing herself against the window of the truck, snarling, her face contorted in a way that made her look like a completely different animal. I stood there, cigarette burning down between my fingers, completely paralyzed with indecision. Part of my brain was screaming that something was very wrong, but another part was saying, "That's Lauren's voice. Maybe she snuck out the other side of the truck while you weren't looking." I took a few hesitant steps toward the voice, squinting to see into the darkness. "Baby," I called again, my mouth suddenly dry. The real Lauren's voice suddenly came from behind me, inside the truck. "What's wrong with Cookie? Why is she barking like that?" That's when it happened. Something hit me from the side with enough force to knock me flat on my back. The air rushed from my lungs, and for a second all I could see were stars. Not the ones in the sky, but the kind that explode behind your eyelids when your head hits the ground. When my vision cleared, I was staring up at a face that has haunted me ever since. It was hovering about a foot above mine, and in the moonlight I could see every detail with horrible clarity. The eyes were what hit me first, glowing white, not reflecting light like an animal's eyes do, but actually emitting a dull, milky glow of their own. They were set in a face that was both animal and not. The snout was long, like a coyote's, but without fur, and the skin looked wrong, too smooth, too tight against the bone. The teeth that protruded from the front were white and pointed, almost translucent. Its ears were pointed straight up, alert, and around its shoulders was what looked like a coyote pelt, draped like a cape. The smell hit me next, a mixture of wet animal fur, dirt, and something metallic, like blood. I couldn't move. It wasn't just fear, though God knows I was terrified. It was like my body wasn't responding to my brain. All I could do was stare up into those eyes, while my heart hammered so hard I thought it would burst. Then it opened its mouth, and I saw the jaw unhinge in a way no natural animals could, revealing rows of dagger-like teeth. A low rattling sound came from deep in its throat. That's when Cookie saved my life. She must have managed to hit the window button or something, because suddenly she was flying through the air, 80 pounds of pure protective fury, and she slammed into the creature with enough force to knock it off me. I scrambled backward on my hands and feet like a crab, trying to put distance between myself and whatever the hell this thing was. In the chaos and moonlight, I got a better look at its full form. It was tall, maybe 6 feet, standing on 2 legs. It had a bushy tail and human-like hands and feet, though the fingers and toes seemed too long, too jointed. Its body was partially covered in fur, but there were large patches of naked skin with what looked like painted stripes, black and red, running across them. Cookie was going absolutely berserk, snapping and snarling at the creature, which was backing away, making this awful hissing sound. The thing kicked out, catching Cookie in the ribs, and she yelped in pain, but didn't back down. The creature turned and loped off into the brush, moving with an unsettling fluidity, like its joints worked differently than they should. I ran back to the truck, shouting for Lauren to unlock the doors, though I don't remember actually forming the words. Cookie was right behind me, and we both piled into the cab. Lauren was fully awake now, eyes wide with fear. "What the fuck was that?" she kept saying, over and over. "What the fuck was that?" I started the engine with shaking hands and peeled out of there, throwing dirt and gravel as the tires found purchase. I was driving way too fast for those roads, but I didn't care. All I wanted was to get as far away from that place as possible. Lauren was checking Cookie over for injuries while I drove. Apart from some scrapes and what would later turn out to be a bruised rib, she was okay, physically at least. She kept whining and looking out the back window, her hackles still raised. We'd gone maybe 15 miles when disaster struck again. A cow was standing in the middle of the road, just over the crest of a hill. I didn't see it until my headlights hit it, and by then it was too late. I swerved, but the front corner of the truck caught the animal's hindquarters. There was a sickening thud, and the truck slewed sideways before I managed to bring it to a stop on the shoulder. The cow was lying in the road, still alive, but clearly suffering. One of its legs was bent at an impossible angle, and it was making this awful, plaintive mooing sound that cut right through me. I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white, trying to process what was happening. Lauren was crying now, saying we needed to help it. We couldn't just leave it like that. She was right, of course. Whatever had happened back at the pullout, I couldn't leave an animal suffering like that. I had a hunting knife in the glove compartment. Not ideal, but it would have to do. I told Lauren to stay in the truck with Cookie and lock the doors. "Are you crazy?" she said. "After what just happened, we should call someone." But we had no cell service out there, and I couldn't justify leaving the cow in agony for however long it would take to find help. I grabbed the knife and a flashlight and stepped out of the truck. The cow's eyes were rolling in fear and pain, and I felt sick at what I had to do. I'd field-dressed deer before, but this was different. I knelt beside the animal, trying to figure out the most humane way to end its suffering. That's when I felt it, that same unnatural stillness from earlier. I swung my flashlight around, and there she was, standing at the edge of the road about 20 feet away. I say she because in the direct beam of the flashlight, the creature looked more female than male, though neither term seemed quite right. The coyote head I'd seen earlier now looked more like a headdress, with a human-like face visible beneath it, though the features were all wrong. Too angular, the mouth too wide, those same glowing eyes. She didn't move toward me this time. She just stood there staring, and I found I couldn't look away. Those eyes held me, and for a moment I felt a bizarre sense of recognition, connection. I don't know how to describe it. Then she opened her mouth and let out a scream that turned my blood to ice. It started as something that might have been a woman's scream, but morphed into something that no human throat could produce. High-pitched, multi-toned, like several creatures screaming at once. Headlights appeared in the distance, coming our way. The creature's head snapped toward them, and then she was gone. Not running away, but leaping in a single bound that carried her far into the darkness beyond the road's edge. The approaching vehicle turned out to be a Bureau of Land Management ranger's truck. The ranger, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, took one look at the situation and handled it professionally. She put the cow down with her service weapon and called in the incident. When I tried to explain about the creature, she gave me a look that was half sympathy, half skepticism. "Probably a coy wolf," she said. "They're coyote-wolf hybrids. They can look pretty strange, especially if you're not expecting to see one. And they can stand on their hind legs sometimes, makes them look bigger than they are." But I know what I saw. No coy wolf has eyes that glow from within. No coy wolf wears a pelt as a cape or has painted markings on its skin. No coy wolf can mimic a human voice with such perfect accuracy that it could fool someone who's heard that voice every day for years. What I saw that night was what the Navajo call a skinwalker. I've done my research since then, read everything I can find about them. The descriptions match too closely to be coincidence. The animal pelts, the mimicry, the painted bodies, the unnatural movements. The rest of our trip passed without incident. We made it to our next destination the following day, and neither Lauren nor Cookie showed any lasting trauma. They both seemed to put it behind them remarkably quickly, but I can't. 6 years later, and I still see those eyes in my dreams. Sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat, convinced that I can hear Lauren's voice calling from somewhere outside our bedroom window. The thing that disturbs me most, though, the thing I've never admitted to anyone until now, is that sometimes I find myself wanting to go back. There was something about those eyes, something hypnotic, something almost elegant. In my dreams, I'm no longer afraid when I see them. In my dreams, I follow when they call. I know how insane that sounds. I know what these creatures are supposed to be. Evil, malevolent, dangerous. And mine certainly was dangerous. But there was something else there too, something I can't explain. Lauren and I broke up about a year after the incident. She said I'd changed, become distant, preoccupied. Cookie stayed with her. Last I heard, they moved to Oregon. Sometimes I wonder if Lauren remembers what happened that night, or if her mind has protected her by forgetting. I wish I could forget, but those eyes won't let me. And sometimes, on nights when I can't sleep, I find myself looking up routes to Utah on my phone, calculating how long it would take me to drive back to that same stretch of road. I never go through with it, but the impulse gets stronger every year. I don't know what I'm looking for by sharing this. Validation? Someone to tell me I'm not crazy? Or maybe just a warning to others. If you're driving through the Utah desert late at night and you hear a familiar voice calling from the darkness, don't answer, no matter how much a part of you might want to.